Chapter 259. Deity quietly watched Qin Weibai's figure disappear, but he didn't see her fall down. Except for saint and military counselor, the super masters of samsara left one after another. The battle stopped, and the sea became calm again. Bright starlight sprinkled down. On the battlefield that had completely ended, everything was calm like a silent picture. God stood where he was, motionless. The others didn't dare to move either. The elites of Zhongzhou state who had suffered heavy losses stood in the center of the battlefield. The remaining team of less than 200 people was almost all seriously injured. Gongsun Qi, the azure dragon of Zhongzhou state, stood in front of the crowd with Tribulation's help. He looked at Deity, who seemed to be thinking about something, with a calm expression. Tribulation's expression was also calm. No one took the initiative to attack Zhongzhou state. The elites of East Island and even the elites of the 5 superpowers had separated quietly at some point. All the elites of the Jiang family of South America had been wiped out. The Heroes Club, the Polar Ground Alliance, the Fantasy World, and Knights Templars, who had lost their leaders, still had a vague connection with each other, but their vigilance toward each other was greater than cooperation. Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Sengquan stood in front of the elites of East Island and didn't say anything. The battle was meaningless. In the final battle of Changdao, all the superpowers sent out their elites frequently, and the flames of war spread to the entire dark world. No matter which side, they all spent a lot of effort, but they all suffered heavy losses, and the final winner didn't belong to any side. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital, which suddenly appeared, broke the plan of all superpowers and became the biggest beneficiary of this final battle. Before the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, or Deity, showed a clear attitude, any action of any other superpower was meaningless. Deity had no attitude. He just stood there quietly in the starry sky, as if he had fallen asleep. Time passed slowly. From night to late night. The bloody smell in the battlefield was getting heavier and heavier, and the atmosphere was constantly depressed in the silence. Everyone's body seemed to be numb from standing, but the anxiety in their hearts kept rising and falling. Then, a phone suddenly rang, breaking the extreme silence on the battlefield. At the front of the East Island camp, Crown Prince Rinha of the royal family answered the phone with a serious look. After saying something respectfully, he started to move forward. Countless people focused their attention on Crown Prince Rinha. Crown Prince Rinha walked toward Deity. His back was straight, but the closer he got to Deity, the more bent his back became. The distance between them shortened. Crown Prince Renha's body finally bent into a humble posture. Ren, he greets your highness. He walked in front of God and bowed deeply. Crown Prince, you're too polite. Deity glanced at him and said in a calm tone. Father has asked me to invite your highness for breakfast. The helicopter is already on its way. Imperial Father will be waiting for you in the palace. Crown Prince Renha's tone became even more respectful. He did not deliberately conceal his voice, so everyone who should have heard it. This was not a surprising choice. East Island suffered a heavy loss in this battle. At least 10 superiors of the half-step invincible realm died in Li Tianlan's hands. Shinichi Miyamoto, the palace master of Liuhua Palace, died. A large number of superiors at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm disappeared, and countless elites of the fire-flaming realm were lost. After this battle, the strength of the special warfare system of East Island was weakened by half. More importantly, even the other half of their strength was basically controlled by God. Tianhai Wuji, Lusheng Sengquan, and a large number of elites of the Divine Wind Force were on the battlefield right now. Deity was also here. Even if he could not kill everyone here, it was easy for him to inflict heavy damage on the remaining strength of East Island. East Island would understand the situation in front of them. So Deity's silence before was equivalent to forcing East Island to make a clear statement. Crown Prince Renha's open invitation was also equal to East Island's attitude to the whole dark world. Whether it was forced or sincerely welcomed, after the Battle of Changdao, East Island had recognized the Purgatory of Heaven capital. This was the best choice. If the Purgatory of Heaven capital didn't appear, the whole East Island would not have the strength to stop the outbreak of Li Tianlan and the attack of the Wang family of Beihai. At that time, the whole special warfare system of East Island would fall, and the royal family would be forced to give up everything under the huge pressure. The whole special warfare system would fall into the hands of Zhongzhou state and the Wang family of Beihai. Without this sharp blade in the dark world, all the future development of East Island would be greatly constrained. The Purgatory of Heaven capital forced the Wang family of Beihai to retreat. To some extent, it saved East Island. At least Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Cangquan, two superiors of the Invincible Realm, were still there. They were still the special warfare force controlled by the royal family. And the most noteworthy thing was the Purgatory of Heaven capital itself. They were different from the complicated beliefs and stances behind the five superpowers, which were supported by financial groups, politics, or religions. They were also different from Zhongzhou state. The Purgatory of Heaven capital had no stance. They only did everything for themselves. This was very similar to the Samsara Palace, and it was the easiest for East Island to accept when there was no other choice. For East Island, the Purgatory of Heaven capital had no stance, which meant that it had the possibility of being assimilated. On the premise of retaining part of its own strength, the Purgatory of Heaven capital could take the lead of the special warfare system of East Island and help them build a foundation in East Island. In a short time, even if the Purgatory of Heaven capital wouldn't help East Island risk its life, at least because they had no stance, they wouldn't go against East Island without hurting their interests. That was enough. And in the future, when they completely accepted the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and deity was willing to fight for East Island, that would be the best result. East Island chose the Purgatory of Heaven capital, which had no stance. Imperceptibly, it actually gave the Purgatory of Heaven capital a stance. The key was to see what they would do in the future. But no matter what, after tonight, East Island had the possibility to keep a super superior who was strong enough to rival Wang Tianzong in East Island. That was the most important thing. Deity looked at Crown Prince Rinhe in silence and didn't speak for a long time. Cold sweat dripped down from Crown Prince Rinhe's forehead. He was the Crown Prince of East Island, with a high position and power. But under absolute force, he was also a non-entity. Crown Prince Rinhe's body bent more and more, as if he wanted to kneel on the ground under Deity's feet. Deity's eyes turned and fell on Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Cangquan. His eyes were gentle, but the two Invincible Realm Saber and Sword Grandmasters felt the inviolable majesty at the same time. They looked at each other, bowed at the same time, and said in a dry voice, "Your Highness." "Ha," Deity chuckled. He hadn't gone to Dongdu Imperial Palace yet, but he issued the first order. "Prepare 5 boats." Crown Prince Rinhe responded subconsciously, and then he froze. Out of instinct, he looked at the battlefield. Zhongzhou State, Fantasy World, Knights Templars, the Polar Ground Alliance, and the Heroes Club. There were exactly 5 families. No one in the Jiang family of South America survived. Sure enough, Deity waved his hand and said blandly, "Tell them to get out." Crown Prince Rinhe wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he bowed and left. From the standpoint of East Island, at this time, with the Purgatory of Heaven capital, it was in the best interest of East Island for them to keep all the forces here. But the first order of God could not be violated in any case, and no one dared to violate it. He made a phone call and withdrew all the troops on the edge of the battlefield. Then he looked at the 5 superpowers, including Zhongzhou State. "Everyone, please." The Polar Ground Alliance was the first to turn around and retreat to the north coast, waiting for their boats. "Send a message back to your master for me." In the stiff formation of the superpowers, Deity's unhurried voice rang out. "You, as well as the other superpowers in the Dark World, get out of Heaven Capital and East Island with me within 12 hours. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." The superpowers left one after another. Whether they were willing or not, they had failed in this Battle of Changdao. A crushing defeat. The roar of the helicopter's rotor came from afar. Deity turned around and looked. In the northernmost area, the people of the Polar Ground Alliance had started to board. Deity walked to the helicopter that was gradually landing. All the people of East Island followed Deity. The people of Sanluo Hall and Athanasia Hall started to leave the battlefield. Phoenix in a fiery red dress turned around and looked at the members of the Hall of Longevity behind her. As she glanced around, many members of the Hall of Longevity showed an unnatural expression. The tacit understanding of the Hall of Longevity was still there. But they seemed a little strange to her, the Hall Master. Phoenix waved her hand. The Hall of Longevity also started to retreat. Only Saint and Military Counselor were left on the battlefield. Saint looked at the people of the Polar Ground Alliance boarding the ship. The killing intent flashed in his eyes, but he suppressed it in the end. "That's it," Saint said. Military Counselor's tone was a little solemn. "Boss, something was wrong just now, yeah." Saint was silent for a while and sighed softly. "We can't help her when it comes to love. Love was a matter between two people. Even if their hearts were dead, even if they were desperate, it had nothing to do with others." "What's your plan?" Military Counselor looked at the sea ahead and asked. Saint narrowed his eyes and said softly, "I'm going to stay in East Island for a while. At least, I have to solve the problem in Tianlan, and then discuss the next step of cooperation with the Purgatory of Heaven capital." "What about you? You're really busy." Military Counselor laughed. On the battlefield where only the two of them were left, they talked to each other casually, as if they were really old friends. "Of course I'm going back to Zhongzhou State. I'm going to take a break for a while and take it as a long vacation." Saint smiled with some playfulness. "Take a break? How many people are most afraid of you taking a break? When you take a break, it's the real bloodbath, right?" Military Counselor smiled and didn't say anything. When he took a break, he was no longer the second Heaven King Military Counselor of Samsara. For some people, this was the most terrible thing. "About Tianlan. Have you decided?" Military Counselor suddenly changed the topic and asked. Saint was silent. At this time, everyone was far away from the battlefield. In the starlight and the sea breeze, only the two of them in black were left. Saint took off his cloak, revealing a thin and determined face, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, handsome and vicissitudes of life. "I can't refuse." Saint lit a cigarette for himself. "And it's just a temporary step back. It's nothing. I hope I can let Tianlan go further by taking a step back." It was just a step back. But this step was a step back from the top of the half-step invincible realm to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Even if it was only temporary, it was still a big step for people like Saint who didn't have many opportunities. It was a big step. Military Counselor didn't say anything. A long time ago, the two of them had already known, whether in terms of life level or martial arts level. The extreme of samsara. It was nirvana. Chapter 260. When Deity got off the helicopter, it was late at night. In the darkest time before dawn, the imperial palace of Dongdu was quiet, and only the lights were shining. This breakfast was a little early. The imperial palace here was also a little small. Looking at Crown Prince Renhe who was leading the way, Deity thought silently. The two walked through the imperial palace in the middle of the night. Along the way, all the lights in the imperial palace were lit up, as if they were paying tribute. It was not a suitable time to visit, but the whole imperial family gave them the highest courtesy. The Mikado and the Empress walked out of the bedchamber and walked down the steps to welcome the new dominator of the East Island Special Warfare System. No matter how they felt inside, they both smiled like a spring breeze. The Mikado was nearly 60 years old, and he was short. After his handsome face got older, he gave people the impression of his demeanor and wisdom. The Empress was a little younger, but she was still beautiful. She stood beside the Mikado with a sweet smile, gentle and generous. Deity walked up to them. The Mikado took the initiative to speak. He looked at Deity in front of him with soft eyes and a soft tone. "Welcome, Your Highness. I asked the Empress to prepare breakfast in person, and I hope your Highness will like it. The Mikado turned his head to welcome the guest with a warm smile. It was a kind of warmth without any emotion, very sincere, but the sincerity was like a mask with boundless calmness and calmness. I don't have much time. Deity shook his head. If the Mikado has something to say, just say it. I won't have breakfast. He called the Mikado, not His Majesty. Obviously, psychologically, Deity completely put his position on the same level as the Mikado. The royal family of East Island never seemed to have any real power, but for generations, the royal family could give up everything, but they always firmly held the power of the special warfare system in their own hands. This result would inevitably change after the rise of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The Mikado, who was mentally prepared, kept his smile and asked casually, Your Highness, are you in a hurry? To save him. Deity's tone was also calm. Oh. The Mikado nodded and said thoughtfully, Li Tianlan. Can he still be saved? 80%. Deity's tone was calm. But the atmosphere in front of the bedchamber suddenly became a little tense. Your Highness, please. The Mikado was silent for a while, then he reached out his hand again and gestured for Deity to enter. He was still smiling, but his eyes were completely calm, with an irresistible temperament. Deity chuckled and walked straight into the bedchamber. The dining room of the bedchamber had prepared a full table of standard Japanese breakfast, but no one knew if it was cooked by the queen. God sat down and drank the sake without saying a word. Although Li Tianlan is young, he has terrible potential. If your Highness saves him, he may become a big problem for East Island in the future. Now that your Highness controls the special warfare system of East Island, you should think about East Island. I don't think it's appropriate to save this person. In the silent atmosphere, the Emperor looked at God and said seriously. Previously, they did not know each other. The reason they could sit together was because of the general trend. Thus, there was no need to be polite to each other. God wanted to get straight to the point, so the Emperor of Mikado went straight to the point. Li Tianlan is nothing to be afraid of. In the end, he is still too young. Deity played with the wine glass in his hand and said casually, I know what you are worried about. But for some special reasons, he had to live now. But he won't grow up. I saved him today, and when the time is right in the future, I will personally kill him. Special reason? Special reasons. Is it because of the cooperation with Samsara Palace? Deity's hand that was playing with the wine glass paused slightly. He raised his head and looked at the Mikado in front of him. This is very important, he said in a calm tone. The Mikado nodded and said, Oh. I have a favor to ask. Deity suddenly said. The Mikado ate a mouthful of sashimi, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. He said with a smile, What do you want? Information. Deity's tone was still calm, and the black cloak covered his whole face. But at this moment, he gave the Mikado an extremely gloomy and cold feeling. Within 7 days, I need to know which special people have been to Ninghu. All the people of the half-step invincible realm are special people. Huawu died in Ninghu. This was the most strange thing and the biggest accident for the Purgatory of Heaven capital. With Huawu's strength, no one of the half-step invincible realm could kill him. Even if he couldn't beat them, he could always escape. If it wasn't an invincible realm expert who took action in person, it could only mean that Huawu died in a siege. And it could only be caused by the siege of at least several half-step invincible realm experts. Deity was now the new master of the special warfare system of East Island, but there was still a gap between the name and the reality. In a short time, he couldn't really keep his word in East Island. But avenging his son had become Deity's obsession. This was the most important thing for him right now. I can give you the information in 3 days. The Mikado said in a calm tone, That's all you need. The dark world of East Island is all mine. What else can I ask for? Deity shook his head in self-mockery. I really want a son, but he's dead. He died in Ninghu a few days ago. The Mikado subconsciously tightened his body. Then he knew why deity wanted that list. His old eyes looked at Crown Prince Renha, who stood respectfully at the dining table, and then looked at the Empress beside him. The Empress's charming and beautiful eyes looked complicated. The Mikado seemed to have made up his mind. He suddenly raised his voice and said, Ziyi. The sound of light footsteps could be heard. Under the bright light in the bedchamber, a touch of heart-shaking purple footsteps walked into the dining room. The purple palace dress fluttered, and her black hair was like clouds. She was a stunning beauty of about 23 or 24 years old. She was tall and beautiful, but the most attractive thing about her was her temperament. It was as if she was born with a reserved and noble temperament, which was a dazzling color in the eyes of the opposite sex. This is my daughter, Princess Ziyi. The Mikado looked at deity with a serious look in his eyes. Your Highness, I can give you whatever you want. You lost a son in Ninghu, and Ziyi can give you another one. From now on, my daughter is your woman. He looked at deity and said word by word, Your Highness, I'm willing to treat the Purgatory of Heaven Capital with the greatest sincerity. I hope the Purgatory of Heaven Capital won't betray me in the end. Princess Ziyi blushed, and her bright eyes peeked at deity, who was completely wrapped in a black cloak. She bit her lip, and her expression was complicated. What do you want? Deity's tone was calm and calm. He waved to Princess Ziyi. The delicate and noble young woman came to him with some hidden bitterness. Deity stretched out his hand impudently and held Ziyi's young but noble body in his arms. He smelled the fragrance from her hair, felt the stiffness and softness of her body, and asked the Mikado. My country is too small, and I can't do anything. I hope your Highness can help me. Looking at his daughter sitting on deity's lap, the Mikado smiled happily. I see. Deity nodded. I know what you mean, and I will help you. The Mikado was overjoyed, and even lost his composure. He stood up, bowed deeply to deity, and said solemnly, Thank you, your Highness. Deity waved his hand, motioning Crown Prince Renha and the Queen to leave. When their figures disappeared in the dining room, he coughed slightly and said, But I need time. About 2 years. He said calmly, I need to heal my wounds. The Mikado was stunned, and his voice trembled. You're injured. You're no match for Wang Tianzong. The first on the divine list. How could he have any match? But he's not much better. His injuries are just a little lighter than mine. Deity shook his head. So even for your plan, the cooperation between the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and the Samsara Palace is extremely important. The Mikado was silent. After a long time, he nodded. I see. Deity said. He suddenly reached out and pinched Ziyi's white and tender chin. Ziyi looked at deity weakly and timidly, and her plump red lips trembled slightly. Would you like to have a son for me? Deity's tone was indifferent. Ziyi blushed. She was a noble princess, but she was still a young woman who had never been in contact with a man. She had to answer such a shameful question when she was hugged by a man for the first time. How could she say it? Say it. Deity said with an indisputable tone. I'd like to. Ziyi whispered like a mosquito. After saying this, she buried her face in Deity's arms as if she didn't dare to see anyone. The Mikado smiled and said nothing. Ziyi and the other princess were originally prepared for Li Tianlan. Now, it seemed much better to give them to Deity. Deity stood up and put his arms around Ziyi's waist. If Ziyi and I have children, what will happen in the future? Deity looked at the Mikado and asked. The Mikado's heart trembled, and he said subconsciously, What do you want? Crown Prince. Deity's tone was arrogant and domineering. If Ziyi and I have children, he must be the Crown Prince of East Island. The Mikado didn't respond. Deity held Ziyi and turned to the dining room. If you fight with Wang Tianzong, what will happen? The Mikado's voice sounded behind him. He was a little hesitant, as if he couldn't make up his mind. If I die, he will be useless. Deity's tone was calm. That's about it. He paused and continued, but if I enter the invincible realm, it will be different. The Mikado's expression changed dramatically. He looked at Deity incredulously and trembled. You're not in the invincible realm? If I'm not in the invincible realm, how can I have the face to say that I've entered the invincible realm? Deity's tone was disdainful. Like those good-for-nothings in your East Island? The invincible realm is the invincible realm of the invincible realm. In the whole dark world, only Wang Tianzong deserves the title of invincible realm. Without saying more, he walked out of the bedchamber and out of the palace with Zi Yi in his arms. The night of the seventh day began to fade away. There was a glimmer of light in the sky. Deity took Zi Ye's hand and walked down the steps in front of the palace. A fiery red dress crawled on the steps in the most pious and humble posture, facing Deity. Deity narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the moving and tempting body curve in his sight. As far as he knew, only Phoenix liked to wear this color. But the woman in front of him was not Phoenix. What's the matter? Deity asked. My Shiranui, the palace master of Liuhua Palace, greets your highness. Mai Shiranui's body became more and more humble. Her delicate hands moved forward, holding up the token that represented the highest power of Liuhua Palace. She didn't hide her intention of surrender at all. Get up. Deity said. Mai Shiranui stood up hesitantly. Her hands still moved forward, and she handed over the token in her hand. Deity didn't take it. He said calmly, keep it. Mai Shiranui's beautiful face looked stunned. Let's go. Deity said and walked down the steps. Mai Shiranui, who looked surprised, followed Deity closely. She said in a trembling voice, thank you, your highness. In the black cloak, facing the dawn of the new day, Deity laughed. His eyes were calm, but he was laughing with his claws and teeth. There was a glimmer of light in the sky of East Island. The morning sun had risen on the border between Zhongzhou State and Annan State. The golden light shrouded the earth. The light passed through the dense forest and fell on the plain. The entire battlefield was a sea of blood. The battle was over. The living and the dead, the martyrs and the warriors gathered together. Heaven and earth were silent. The unidentified rebels and the elites of the 5 superpowers had disappeared without a trace. There were a lot of corpses on the ground, and those who were alive had already fled to the distance. Only the military flag of Zhongzhou State's Border Control Corps and the star flag of Zhongzhou State were flying on the battlefield at the same time, shining with bloody light in the morning sun. There were less than 5,000 people left in the Thunderbolt Battalion, the most elite of Zhongzhou State's Border Control Corps. But at this moment, everyone still stood neatly in a formation that could attack at any time. Even if there were no enemies in front of them. Dongqing Wudi, the marshal of Zhongzhou State and the commander of the Border Control Corps, walked straight ahead on the silent battlefield, all the way south. The military flag of the Border Control Corps and the star flag of Zhongzhou State stood side by side in the southernmost position, whistling in the cold morning wind. An old figure appeared in the south and walked slowly over. In the morning wind, he was also holding a flagpole in his hand. On the flagpole, the star flag had been riddled with holes, but it kept breaking. The broken star flag danced in the air, looking more and more piercing. One figure after another came out from behind the old man holding the flagpole. The whole place was silent. Dongqing Wudi, who was standing under the flag of the army, suddenly felt hot in his eyes. He looked at the old man in his sight and the veterans behind him. A team of more than 100 people. This was the remaining Li family. They fought against the elites of the 5 superpowers and the Saint War Angel of the Vatican. After several days and nights of fierce fighting, there were less than 50 people left in the team of more than 100 people. But everyone's expression was calm. No regrets. Dongqing Wudi slowly raised his arm. Behind him, the commanders of the 4 armies, Wang Wantian, Shi Hanbing, Qing Huaining, and Xiao Dongzhan, raised their arms at the same time. Every soldier of the Thunderbolt Battalion also raised his arm. Salute. The old man holding the flag slowly returned the salute. He came to Dongqing Wudi. I'm still old. Li Honghe smiled. I didn't catch that little guy, and he ran away. Senior Li, Dongqing Wudi couldn't control his trembling voice at all. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, You've done enough. Please pay attention to your own health, it doesn't matter. Li Honghe shook his head. I'm too tired. We're all too tired. From now on, the Li family will only live for the Li family. In any case, the Li family is a hero. Dongqing Wudi looked at Li Honghe and said in a firm tone. Li Honghe smiled. He was a hero. Throughout his life, he was worthy of this title. But what could a hero do? He looked up into the distance. In his sight, the beautiful mountains and rivers were covered with blood. A little tired. Li Honghe shook his head. I'm tired. He turned to look at the Li family's team of less than 50 people and whispered, Let's go home. From Dongqing Wudi to the ordinary soldiers, everyone saluted at the same time and watched Li Honghe and others leave the battlefield. In the silence, Li Honghe's figure disappeared. Dongqing Wudi suddenly reached out, pulled out the army flag beside him, and shouted, Where is this? Zhongzhou State. Zhongzhou State. Zhongzhou State. A tsunami of cheers suddenly sounded and swept through the world. Where was this? A few days ago, they broke through the border between Zhongzhou State and Annan State. Today, after fighting all the way, the Li family and the Border Control Corps had penetrated 800 miles into the territory of Annan State. But it didn't matter. Now, this was Zhongzhou State. It could only be Zhongzhou State. The roar of the helicopter's rotors sounded in the sky. Two figures jumped down from the helicopter one after the other and landed on the ground. Wang Tianzong. Di Jiang. Dongqing Wudi narrowed his eyes, hesitated, and walked toward them. Wang Tianzong quietly looked at the blood-stained battlefield in his sight, as if looking at his own country. Dongqing Wudi came over. Well done. Thank you for your hard work. Wang Tianzong turned his head and looked at Dongqing Wudi. I'm just keeping my promise. Thanks to Senior Li this time. Dongqing Wudi's tone was indifferent. Wang Tianzong was silent for a moment. Finally, he changed the topic and pointed to Di Jiang beside him. From today on, he will be in charge of the new army. The Heaven Punishment Troop will also be stationed here temporarily. Dongqing Wudi nodded and turned a blind eye to Di Jiang's outstretched hand. He just said blandly, I will replenish the Thunderbolt Battalion as soon as possible and complete the handover. He turned and left. From now on, the former Thunderbolt Battalion no longer existed. Dongqing Wudi would completely replenish the Thunderbolt Battalion to 20,000 people, and the 20,000 people with the most combat power among the hundreds of thousands of troops of the Border Control Corps, together with the 800 miles of land, would belong to the Wang family of Beihai. Dongqing Wudi might rebuild the Thunderbolt Battalion after the handover, but that Thunderbolt would not be the current Thunderbolt after all. The current Thunderbolt Battalion would stay here with Di Jiang and play the role they should play. In the general trend, after the fight, everything was a deal. It was all about balance and compromise. The morning sun rose into the sky. Dark clouds floated over the sky. The golden sun was blocked. Li Honghe had gone far with the people of the Li family. Summer and autumn were alternating. Rain fell from the sky in the early morning. It was another rainstorm. Dongqing Wudi withdrew from the border. All the superpowers began to withdraw from Changdao. This seemed to be an era of constant withdrawal and turmoil. What Li Honghe said to Dongqing Wudi spread. After the final battle, the Li family, which had been silent for many years, began to live only for the Li family. The Li family began to really withdraw from Zhongzhou State and dissipated its afterglow. Time passed quickly. It also withdrew quickly. Samsara Palace began to withdraw from Zhongzhou State. Everyone thought that the cooperation between Samsara Palace and the Purgatory of Heaven Capital was a betrayal to Zhongzhou State, and it was true. But when everyone wanted to settle accounts with Samsara Palace, they found that there was nothing to find. They had no foundation in Zhongzhou state. The only foundation was Qin Weibai's Pre-Qin International Group. Pre-Qin International Group was acquired by all parties in the shortest time, and the whole group was renamed. In just a few days, Samsara Palace completely eliminated the last trace of itself in Zhongzhou state. All the details of the Battle of Changdao were publicized. Li Tianlan's name began to shine throughout the dark world for the first time. A 19-year-old invincible realm expert. No matter how coincidental the result was, at least Li Tianlan did amaze the whole dark world that night. The names of the 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou state began to disappear. Li Tianlan became the only heavenly son of Zhongzhou state. No one said anything, even Kunlun city and the Wang family of Beihai. Because Li Tianlan was dead. The rise of the Purgatory of Heaven capital in East Island shocked the whole dark world. The mysterious deity of fearless Wang Tianzong, the 3 halls of Sunluo, life prolonging, and Athanasii that had never appeared became the hottest topics in the dark world. And the appearance of deity also aroused the vigilance of all the big shots in the dark world. Some people had begun to guess the relationship between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the Samsara Palace. At this time, people suddenly remembered that the general trend in the dark world started from the destruction of Night Spirit and the Samsara Palace's desire to lay the foundation for itself. More recently, it all started from the final battle between the master of Samsara Palace and Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou state. And all this was just the mysterious Samsara Palace's desire to get a bigger voice and more benefits in the dark world. But after everything was over, the Samsara Palace still kept silent. They still had no foundation. All this benefited the Purgatory of Heaven capital. It seemed to be a real help. The Purgatory of Heaven capital got a list. Although it was not the list that deity wanted the most, it was a list that made all the dark superpowers angry and even frightened. In less than 3 days after the final battle of Changdao, deity personally killed 4 superiors of the half-step invincible realm from the superpowers who had hidden in East Island and never left. Several secret agencies of the dark superpowers in East Island were completely destroyed. In just a few days, there were only the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the forces of East Island left in the land of East Island. The Mikado was delighted and announced that deity was the national god of war of East Island for the first time. And the dark superpowers of the entire East Island, because of the participation of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and after the final battle of Changdao, seemed to be more confident than before. As if in response to the arrogance of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and East Island, Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun city, and Situ Tsangyue, the governor of Sai city, returned to Zhongzhou state from Northern Europe and North America respectively. Several superpowers, led by Zhongzhou state, cooperated with each other at the first time. The currency war that had been in stalemate in East Island for many days completely broke out in one day. In the international market, the yen began to rise crazily, and the rise was almost desperate. It was September. The currency of East Island had appreciated nearly 6 times as much as before. Unimaginable wealth had been plundered by various countries and consortiums. Countless enterprises and groups in East Island had closed down one after another, and countless families had gone bankrupt. East Island was in chaos and suffering. Almost at the same time, Annan State submitted a petition to the United Nations to protest against Zhongzhou State. The president of Annan State went to the headquarters of the United Nations in person and accused Zhongzhou State of occupying the land of hundreds of miles around Annan State and stationing tens of thousands of troops. Annan State asked Zhongzhou State to withdraw its troops immediately. The explanation given by Zhongzhou State was to help Annan State suppress the rebellion. After Annan State made it clear that it refused Zhongzhou State's kindness, Zhongzhou State said that it would withdraw its troops within 24 hours. It didn't take 24 hours at all. The reorganized Thunderbolt Battalion only took a few minutes to take off their uniforms and burn them completely. 20,000 troops plus the Heaven Punishment Troop were stationed in the land that originally belonged to Annan State. From any point of view, they had nothing to do with Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Wudi began to form a new Thunderbolt Battalion. The aftermath of the general trend was still spreading, but there was no more turbulence on the whole. The midsummer gradually passed. Time went forward, and it was autumn. The general trend was slowly dissipating, and the dispute was ending. There were only ripples left in the whole dark world. Chapter 261. This year, the final battle of Changdao seemed to be the dividing line of the entire dark world. The noise and chaos before the war formed a sharp contrast with the peace and quiet after the war. The Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy reopened. To be exact, it was the official start of school. The first semester of the two academies was roughly between April and May. After the entrance maneuver, all the courses would officially open after a short break. But this year's special situation broke the rule. Changdao postponed everything for a few months, and the official start of school was set in September. The students of the two academies returned to the academy to report, and the standard of the opening ceremony skyrocketed. President Li Huacheng, the leader of the academics of Zhengzhou State, came to the Sky Academy accompanied by Gu Xingyun, the governor of Kunlun City, and Yi Dongsheng, the god of army of Zhengzhou State. Chen Fengqing, the leader of the Prince Group and Prime Minister of Zhengzhou State, went to the Deep Sea Academy accompanied by Marshal Qi Baizong, the Minister of the Army Headquarters, and Marshal Dongqing Wudi, the commander of the Border Control Corps. Huading in September was still hot. The chaos that spread from the Sky Academy to the whole of Huading had passed, and the whole city was quiet. The entrance ceremony had been held a few months ago, and the class division had been completed. All the early procedures were directly skipped. The entire Sky Academy stood in phalanxes one after another according to the class. As the headmaster, Zhuang Huayang also had a square formation behind him. It was the smallest of all the contestants. There were only 17 people. Among them, 2 had lost their arms and 10 were seriously injured. Zhuang Huayang held a list of the dead in his hand. When Zhengzhou State conspired against East Island, both the Deep Sea Academy and the Sky Academy sent out their most elite students. The so-called most elite students naturally referred to the classes led by the 2 headmasters. After several months of killing, there were only 17 left from the original 50. The scene was solemn and sorrowful. The official opening of the school was at the gate of the Sky Academy without a gate. In front of the huge stone carved with the words "The Land of Heroes." The names of the previous victims of the Sky Academy were carved on the boulder. Zhuang Huayang stood in front of the boulder, holding a carving knife in his hand. He carved one name after another. The carving knife had red paint on it, and the carved names were also red as blood. The audience looked at Zhuang Huayang's movements with respect and did not speak. Zhuang Huayang engraved the names on the list one by one until there was only one left. He was a person that the entire world knew. He turned around and looked at the front of the crowd. President Li Huacheng of Zhengzhou State, who came to watch the ceremony, looked serious. Dressed in a black suit, he looked mournful and regretful. Li Huacheng turned his head and glanced at Gu Xingyun's face. Just as Gu Xingyun was about to make a move, Li Huacheng had already set his eyes on the face of a woman beside him. The woman was extremely beautiful, but her expression was somewhat wooden and empty. It was Situ Tsangyue, the governor of Sai City, who had returned to Huading from North America. Instead of returning to Sai City, she stayed in the Sky Academy to recuperate with tribulation. "Thank you, Tsangyue." Li Huacheng slowly opened his mouth, and his face seemed to struggle to form a strained smile. Situ Tsangyue nodded and waved her long sleeves. A gentle force suddenly lifted Li Huacheng up. His body rose until it was as tall as the boulder. Gu Xingyun's pupils shrank slightly, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, but he did not speak. A land of heroes. The word "hero" was carved at the top of the stone tablet. The surroundings were empty. Li Huacheng stared at the boulder and held the carving knife in his hand tightly. Slowly, with great force, he carved the first stroke. He engraved it with great force and the font was not small, so the name was very clear. There was a suffocating atmosphere on the scene. A name slowly took shape under Li Huacheng's carving knife and became neat, lively and vigorous. Li Tianlan. A name, a legend, a heavenly sun. Under everyone's gaze, President Li Huaqing personally engraved the name of the last person who died in the Battle of the Sky Academy. It was engraved at the top of the stone tablet. It was clear and distinct. Salute to the hero. Behind Li Huaqing came Yi Dongxing's roar with all his might. All the teachers and students, including Li Huaqing and Gu Xingyun, raised their hands to salute. The sun shone on the boulder. Outside the Sky Academy, the river and the sea converged. On the sunny ground, thousands of teachers and students raised their hands silently and forcefully, looking solemn. After the glory of the Li family was extinguished, Li Tianlan became the most dazzling young man in the whole dark world. Many people present had not even seen him, but everyone knew that if it weren't for him, the final battle of Changdao might have had a different result. The scene under the starry sky that day was really too complicated. If Li Tianlan hadn't appeared, what could Wang Tianzong and the Heaven Punishment Troop do? Wang Tianzong would have faced the siege of 5 invincible realm experts and 2 murderous weapons, including deity. At that time, the final battle had reached a critical point. When no one knew how terrifying deity's strength was, Wang Tianzong, who ranked first on the divine list, appeared in Changdao, which would make everyone instinctively unite as if they were facing a formidable enemy. 5 invincible realm experts, 2 murderous weapons, several half-step invincible realm experts, and more superiors at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Even if Wang Tianzong had extraordinary abilities, how could he protect himself? If there was no Li Tianlan, what would happen to Wang Tianzong, Zhongzhou State, and the Wang family of Beihai? Just thinking about that kind of scene would make people's blood freeze. Similarly, Li Tianlan's achievements were also shocking. To some extent, he saved the stability of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Even if it wasn't his intention, it didn't matter. What mattered was the result. He was a hero. He was a hero. Li Beidian quietly looked at Li Tianlan's name on the stone tablet, with confusion in his eyes. There were thousands of sword intents in Mount Shu. The 4 sword masters of Mount Shu were pure swordsmen. With Li Beidian's identity, he didn't need to come to the Sky Academy to study, and he wouldn't be assigned to the same dormitory as Li Tianlan, which seemed to be a coincidence. Everything had been arranged. Ning Qianqing should be the same. He was with Li Tianlan because of Dongqing Wudi's order. Li Beidian was entrusted by someone. First senior brother also knew about this. After a detailed understanding, he finally acquiesced in the fact that he and Yi Huayu came to the Sky Academy. The mentality of deliberately getting close to him and making friends was actually very subtle. But after a short contact, Li Beidian felt that Li Tianlan was a good person. They once fought against the Lu family in the entrance maneuver and went through thick and thin together. In Changdao, when he learned that he and Ning Qianqing were in danger, he rushed from Changdao to Zhongjing without hesitation and went through thick and thin together. Up to now, they hadn't been together for a long time, but it didn't matter how they got together. Now they were brothers and recognized each other, and that was enough. Ning Qianqing's body swayed a little in the crowd. His current injury was so serious that he could barely walk on the ground. Yu Qingyan supported him by his side and looked at the frightening name on the stone tablet with him. Yu Qingyan's eyes were a little red and swollen, as if she had been crying. But Ning Qianqing looked calm. He didn't believe that Li Tianlan was dead. Even though Li Tianlan died in front of him with a sword through his chest. But Qin Weibai's reaction at that time seemed a little abnormal. The battlefield was too chaotic at that time. All kinds of sword energy whistled between heaven and earth, and all the scenes seemed to be faintly discernible. But somehow, maybe because he wasn't far from Li Tianlan, Ning Qianqing saw everything at that time. He didn't hear a lot of words, but he saw Qin Weibai's performance. The sword directly penetrated Li Tianlan's heart, and blood burst out under the starlight. At that moment, Qin Weibai was very calm. She seemed to have expected this kind of thing, or she had already expected that kind of result. When he took Li Tianlan from Saint's arms, his hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear, it was pure heartache. From the beginning to the end, he never felt the despair of losing a loved one from Qin Weibai. He just felt a deep sense of guilt and desolation. The people from the purgatory of heaven capital took away Li Tianlan's body. At that moment, Ning Qiancheng, who was already seriously injured, vaguely saw Qin Weibai turn around. Extremely resolute. It was hard for him to understand the feelings between Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai. But if she hadn't carved the feelings into her bones and blood, she wouldn't have had that kind of look in her eyes when she held Li Tianlan's body. If everything was really irreversible, why would Qin Weibai turn around so resolutely and throw away Li Tianlan's body? Ning Qiancheng thought of the text message he received this morning. The text message was from his father, who hadn't contacted him for several years. Now, because hundreds of fire-flaming realm elites from the Eastern Theater of Operations were lost in Changdao, the strength of the Eastern Theater of Operations was greatly reduced. His father should have been badly battered at this time. The general trend is clear. Do what you have to do. Ning Qiancheng thought of the text message and turned to look at Li Beidian beside him. Do you really believe? Before he could finish his words, Li Beidian shook his head and interrupted him. That name is really an eyesore. Li Beidian looked at the stone tablet in front of him and said. Wang Yuetong was also looking at the stone tablet in front of her. Her eyes were dazed and blurred. The pride of the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai began to fade bit by bit. When Li Huaqing completely carved the name on the stone tablet, she couldn't help it anymore. She trembled slightly and burst into tears. In the days before Li Tianlan's departure, Wang Yuetong could feel his intimacy towards her and his occasional possessiveness. The two of them had slept in the same bed. All this showed that Li Tianlan seemed to have accepted her identity. An identity that didn't seem to be very glorious. But Wang Yuetong didn't care about this. Not because she really didn't care, but because she didn't think it was necessary. She really liked Li Tianlan. She liked him so much that she was willing to give herself to him completely. But Wang Yuetong didn't think about the future. Maybe she occasionally thought that the resentment between the Wang family and the Li family would slowly disappear because of her and Li Tianlan, but fantasy could only be fantasy after all. She was the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai and had a noble status. But in the rise and fall of the wealthy families and in the general trend of Zhongzhou state, it was insignificant. So Wang Yuetong didn't think about the future. She just liked Li Tianlan and wanted to be with him. Even if they would separate in the future, at least they had each other. The unseen future was right in front of her. She thought how ridiculous the so-called identity was. Maybe it was enough to be with him without regrets. Wang Yuetong took out her mobile phone with trembling hands. On the mobile phone's communication software were the messages that Wang Yuetong had sent to Li Tianlan in the past few months. They were all trivial things, like a little girl who liked to pester her boyfriend. Li Tianlan didn't reply to any of them. How could Li Tianlan reply when he was plotting against East Island in the general trend and he wasn't sure if he would have a huge conflict with the Wang family of Beihai now? He didn't reply, and he couldn't reply in the future. Wang Yuetong's eyes became more and more desolate. She couldn't imagine how resolute the cruel man was when he pulled out the sword for Qin Weibai in Changdao. She couldn't imagine his reluctance and melancholy after the sword light dissipated. Everything seemed to be doomed. She and he really had no future. Not separation, but death. Like was no longer like. She looked at the gradually blurring name on the stone tablet. Until this moment, Wang Yuetong realized that she really fell in love with that man. But he was already dead. The crowd began to disperse. Zhuang Huayang accompanied Li Huaqing, Gu Xingyun, and others to his office. Now the most awe-inspiring pair of sister and brother in the dark world of Zhongzhou state stayed where they were, quietly looking at the stone tablet in front of them. What will happen to him? Situ Tsangyue looked at Li Tianlan's name and suddenly asked. Who? Tribulation's eyes were dim. He looked at his sister in white beside him and asked softly. The question was actually obvious. But Situ Tsangyue seemed to be stumped by her own question. After a long time, she said softly, what will happen to Tianlan? I don't know. Tribulation shook his head. He really didn't know. But Samsara is quiet. Saint has returned to Zhongzhou state. Tribulation thought for a moment and said again. Samsara was quiet, which was the best news. Samsara withdrew from Zhongzhou state. Ha! Situ Tsangyue shook her head and did not continue. On the surface, Samsara did withdraw from Zhongzhou state, but it only lost Pre-Qin International Group. Saint returned to Zhongzhou state. Combined with what they gained from this trip, Samsara could even be said to have taken another step forward in Zhongzhou state. Don't you want to ask something else? Tribulation said. What? Situ Tsangyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Ask him. Tribulation said calmly, Senluo, life prolonging, immortality, these, what's there to ask? Situ Tsangyue said indifferently, he is not him. Otherwise, how could Tianlan die? Not die. Tribulation corrected Situ Tsangyue's statement, he has died. There's nothing different about it. Situ Tsangyue shook her head. Tribulation said no more. A trace of blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. Under the silver mask, Tribulation tightly pursed his lips, and his eyes seemed to become dimmer. What happened? Situ Tsangyue's eyes turned cold. Haven't you controlled the injury you got in Changdao? The injury in Changdao is under control. Tribulation smiled in a complicated tone. But the injury after the breakthrough can't be controlled. Even if I didn't break through at that time, I was sure that I could kill Miyamoto. But I could feel that it was the best chance for me to break through. I succeeded, and now I'm in the invincible realm. Tribulation laughed at himself. But it's better not to succeed. It's better not to enter the invincible realm. Isn't it ridiculous? Situ Tsangyue did not laugh. Her body slowly tightened, and she looked at Tribulation without saying a word. At noon in late summer and early autumn. The sun was blazing. Tribulation stood quietly, like a lonely shadow. The dark world completely calmed down. As the Battle of Changdao passed, the dark superpowers, which had different losses, also entered a period of recuperation. The conflicts in all aspects were suppressed. Even if there were some waves, they became the internal affairs of the superpowers and countries. But all the superpowers knew that the current situation was not over. The current calm was merely the brewing of an even greater storm. Zhongzhou state began to deal with its internal affairs in an orderly manner. All the follow-up events after the final battle of Changdao were solved one by one. Li Tianlan was a topic that couldn't be avoided. After a few days of preparation, Kunlun city of Zhongzhou state finally reluctantly took out 2 new lists. When they saw the list, many people suddenly realized that it was time to re-rank the top 10 experts of the young generation in Zhongzhou state. It was time to re-rank not only the top 10 experts of the young generation, but also the top 10 contemporary experts of Zhongzhou state. No one was surprised by the rankings on the 2 new lists. The pattern of the top 10 experts of the young generation was completely changed. Li Tianlan became the well-deserved first place and the first expert of the young generation in Zhongzhou state. Wang Xingxiao followed him closely. He was no longer tied with Gu Hanshan. Gu Hanshan ranked 3rd. Dongqing Rushi moved back 1 place from the original ranking, but she surpassed Jiang Shangyu in front of her and ranked 4th. Li Beidian ranked 5th, second only to Jiang Shangyu. The 6th and 7th were a couple that surprised everyone. Ning Qianqing was on the list, while Yu Qingyan was on the list for the first time. The battle record of poisoning a thunder-shocking realm expert made this girl, who was good at using poison, famous in Zhongzhou state. If some people didn't think poison was a foreign object, Yu Qingyan's ranking would even be higher. The 8th was Du Hanin, who had been on the list and then dropped out. After her wind vein was destroyed and mutated, it was no problem for her to be on the list. Wang Yuetong, who had never participated in the final battle of Changdao, dropped out of the list. The last 2 on the list were Qi Zhaoxi, the young master of Azura Path, who also didn't participate in the final battle of Changdao, and Zhongli Wuxin, the last disciple of the Dean of the Deep Sea Academy. The list attracted a fair amount of attention, but not too many people talked about it. The list was updated every year, so it was obvious that it was not real. And the hottest topic was the ranking of the top 10 contemporary experts of the empire. The 10 people on the list, which was updated every 5 years, basically represented the peak combat capability of Zhongzhou state in the next 5 years. This was a big deal. The ranking of the young generation was fluctuating. The ranking of the older generation was also adjusting. And on this valuable list, Li Tianlan was also on the list. Wang Tianzong, Gu Xingyun, Situzang Yue. After the top 3, Li Tianlan ranked 4th among the top 10 experts of Zhongzhou state. Behind him was Tribulation, who had broken through the invincible realm. The first elder of Kunlun city, who was also in the invincible realm, had been pushed to the 6th. Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu, ranked 7th. Dongqing Wudi, the god of massacre of Zhongzhou state, ranked 8th. The name of Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy, did not appear on the list. The 9th place was also a young man. Wang Xingxiao from the Wang family of Beihai. With the combat capability he had shown in Changdao, no one questioned this ranking. The 10th place was given to Hua Qingfeng, the sect master of the Shadow sect and the Shadow Guard of Zhongzhou state who had been in Yuzhou all year round. In terms of quality, the ranking this time only looked at the surface. There was no doubt that the high-end combat capability of Zhongzhou state had greatly increased. The top 6 all had the combat capability of the invincible realm. The young Wang Xingxiao of the Thundershocking realm entered the list, which gave people infinite expectations. But whether it was the list of the young generation or the list of the contemporary generation, one of them was always an illusion. Li Tianlan was already dead. In many people's eyes, these 2 lists had become the last traces of him in the world. But people who also believed that there would be miracles began to mention the things that Kunlun city had been unwilling to mention and publicize. Merit. Li Tianlan's merit. Everyone's merit. The Sky Academy had begun to count Li Tianlan's credits. Some people began to study the level of East Emperor Palace. The Sky Academy reported the calculated credits to Kunlun city. 80,000 credits. This was a number that was big enough to make anyone completely desperate. It broke the record of the highest credits since the establishment of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy. Kunlun city almost did not hesitate to reject the information reported by the Sky Academy. As a result, Headmaster Zhuang Huayang seemed to be angry and reported 100,000 credits for the second time. The credit statistics of the 2 special warfare academies had strict rules. But the problem was that Li Tianlan killed 2 invincible realm experts in Changdao and even took a murderous weapon, which could not be calculated at all. Even if Kunlun city rejected it, it dared not to reject Li Tianlan's credits alone, but to reject it with other people's. With Li Tianlan's merit, at this time, even if Zhuang Huayang said 1 million credits, no one would say anything. Because Li Tianlan was a hero. Kunlun city was silent for 2 days and finally approved the credits reported by the Sky Academy. 100,000 credits. Of course, the 100,000 credits were not counted on Li Tianlan himself, but on the whole East Emperor Palace. But it didn't matter, because it was destined to be a number that could not be broken. The first place of this year's Sky Academy had been born in advance when the school started. Mount Dibbing. Wang Tianzong was also looking at the list in his hand. Sitting opposite him was Wang Xingxiao. The 9th place, is a little flamboyant. Wang Tianzong shook the list in his hand. But it doesn't matter. You've grown up now. My requirement for you remains the same. It's still the same word, caution. Why don't you let Brother Jiang do it? Wang Xingxiao took the list in Wang Tianzong's hand and asked. He looked at the names on it. Li Tianlan's name was on it. It was a little dazzling. It's not up to me to decide. Wang Tianzong shook his head. If Dijiang appeared on the list, even if he couldn't suppress Gu Qianchuan, he would replace the ranking of Nirvana Sword Master. But it was Kunlun City, the power center of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, that decided this kind of thing. No matter how powerful the Wang family of Beihai was, it couldn't control Gu Xingyun. Wang Xingxiao didn't say anything. He just quietly lowered his head and looked at the list in his hand, which seemed to be light and heavy. Not reconciled? Wang Tianzong asked, as if he knew what his son was thinking. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, his performance in Changdao that day deserves to be remembered by Zhongzhou State. I have nothing to say about ranking fourth. Remembered by Zhongzhou State, Wang Tianzong gently narrowed his eyes, lit a cigarette, and said blandly, not just Zhongzhou State. Wang Xingxiao's palm trembled. He suddenly remembered another ranking in the Dark World this year. A ranking that represented the peak combat capability in the entire Dark World. This ranking was also an important reason for the battle between the Master of Samsara Palace and Gu Xingyun. The ranking on the World Divine List. He looked at Wang Tianzong in disbelief. Nothing strange. Wang Tianzong's tone was indifferent. A 19-year-old Invincible Realm expert killed 2 Invincible Realm experts in one battle, one of whom was the 9th on the Divine List. Li Tianlan will definitely enter the Divine List and be remembered by the entire Dark World. That was a sword light that could amaze the entire Dark World, not because of how powerful it was, but because of the vitality before the end of the road. The owner of that sword light was only 19 years old. A 19-year-old Invincible Realm expert was destined to be forgotten in a short time. I've signed it. Wang Tianzong looked at Wang Xingxiao and said. The ranking on the World Divine List required the joint signatures of all the known Invincible Realm experts in the world and all the superpowers. But when the opinions of the majority overwhelmed the minority, the ranking would take effect. And the ranking on the Divine List was also related to the division of interests of the superpowers in the Dark World. Li Tianlan now occupied a place on the Divine List. He replaced Aldak, who was killed by him, and ranked 9th on the Divine List. Wang Tianzong was still the first on the Divine List. But Arsis, who was ranked 2nd, became 3rd. The deity of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital replaced Arsis and became the 2nd master on the World Divine List. Gu Xingyun's ranking dropped 1 place to the 5th. The master of Samsara Palace now ranked 4th. Situ Tsangyue, the hidden god of Zhongzhou State, rushed from 15th to 11th on the Divine List. It was an interesting phenomenon. In Zhongzhou State, Situ Tsangyue ranked higher than Li Tianlan, but on the Divine List, Li Tianlan ranked higher than Situ Tsangyue. But it didn't matter anymore. Wang Tianzong thought of the list that would spread to every corner of the Dark World today, and his eyes were indifferent. The 15th Invincible Realm expert on the Divine List. Now, there was a dead man. It was a name that needed to be remembered by the Dark World. But he had long forgotten about it. Because there was no point in remembering. What needed to be remembered was the past. Chapter 262. In September, although the temperature in Tiandu was still not low, accompanied by the sea breeze, it had become cool after nightfall. Heaven capital was Changdao. In less than a month after the final battle of Changdao, everyone seemed to have forgotten the name of Changdao. This place had become Tiandu, the Tiandu of the gods. On the newly printed map of East Island, Heaven capital replaced Changdao. In less than a month, the Purgatory of Heaven capital began to gradually control the special warfare system of East Island, and all the procedures were being handed over. After Shinichi Miyamoto's death, Mai Shiranui, the young palace master of Liuhua Palace, sought refuge with the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Now, she had become the palace master of Liuhua Palace. Their addition made it easier for deity to control the divine wind force. After suffering a crushing defeat in the currency war, East Island was as quiet as a pool of stagnant water. But in the eyes of the observant people, East Island was changing almost every moment. The extremely mysterious Purgatory of Heaven capital and the battered East Island. Under the disaster, the two were merging at an incredible speed and eventually became inseparable. Military Counselor felt like he was a witness to everything. He now lived in the temporary headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, guarding Li Tianlan. This place was too close to the mysterious god, so close that he could even hear every decision made by God and feel the subversive changes that those decisions brought to East Island. Military counselor did not leave Tiandu. For the time being, he didn't get the rest that he wanted. Instead, it was Saint who returned to Zhongzhou State first after finishing his own business. Saint had retreated from the peak of the half-step invincible realm to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. While his foundation was getting more and more stable, it also meant that his combat capability was declining. In this way, the task of guarding Li Tianlan fell on military counselor. Military counselor had seen a lot these days. If there was no accident, even if the Samsara Palace continued to cooperate with the Purgatory of Heaven capital, this was probably the only chance for him to observe this force closely. The more the military counselor watched, the more solemn his heart became. God had done a lot of things these days. Military counselor could vaguely feel that some things were aimed at East Island. Although the Purgatory of Heaven capital now controlled the special warfare system of East Island, it could not use the people of East Island to do things against East Island. This was what made the military counselor shudder the most. Because from the beginning to the end, whether it was daybreak, dawn, or phoenix, the three of them had been staying here. God himself had never left. So where are the people who did those things? Now, it seemed that as time passed, the number of people God's hands could use seemed to increase, and it became easier to do things. Silently, military counselor could easily sense the huge power hidden in the darkness. Unknown to others, but successful in every endeavor. With the entire special warfare system of East Island as the bargaining chip. The Samsara Palace helped deity, but was the seemingly powerful Purgatory of Heaven capital really in line with the interests of the Samsara Palace? Looking at the tranquil night outside the window, the military counselor remained motionless. He was so depressed that he could barely breathe. "What are you thinking about?" A voice suddenly rang out beside the military advisor. It sounded gentle and warm. The military counselor had long been used to God appearing beside him without warning. He shook his head calmly. "Nothing." "Oh," God said. He was not wearing the black cloak, nor was he holding the ferocious death scythe. He stood there in casual clothes. The only feeling he gave people was that he was peaceful and real. "Today is the last day," deity suddenly said. The military counselor's expression suddenly froze. The last day. It had been more than half a month since the final battle of Changdao. Military counselor had never seen Li Tianlan, so he didn't know his specific situation. Li Tianlan stopped at the villa where military counselor was, but deity gave a strict order that no one was allowed to disturb him. Military counselor could only guard outside and could do nothing. Deity would come here almost every day, and the time he stayed gradually changed from 3 to 5 hours at the beginning to 1 or 2 hours, and then to dozens of minutes. Until now. This was the last day. Will Tianlan wake up? Military counselor was excited, and there was some awe in his eyes. Deity could save Li Tianlan. He knew this a long time ago. But Li Tianlan really had no signs of life at that time. If Li Tianlan could wake up today, it would be equivalent to resurrection. What kind of means was this? "Do you want him to wake up?" Deity asked with a strange expression. Military counselor was excited, but he was still not calm. He said seriously, "I just want him to recover." "If you want to recover completely, you can't wake up now. There is still one thing missing." Deity seemed to think of something, and there was a trace of coldness in his eyes. "What is it?" Military counselor took a deep breath and asked. "A flower." Deity said blandly, "So after today, you have to take him away from here." "That flower has bloomed. It's in Lin'an, Zhongzhou State, Qingyun Temple." Qingyun Temple, military counselor repeated it silently, and he looked a little surprised. "Great Master Wu Wei is there." Deity turned his head and took a deep look at military counselor. His eyes seemed to be able to penetrate everything. Finally, he laughed softly. "Do you know that place? Judging from your tone, you seem to have been there." Military counselor. Military counselor. He shook his head. "Most of the 12 super masters of Samsara have traces. Even the identity of saint is not a secret in my eyes now. But you, I have never heard of you. Who are you? What about you? Military counselor's eyes were somewhat meaningful. Who are you? Of course I am deity. Deity's tone was indifferent. Of course I am military counselor. Military counselor was equally indifferent. Deity said no more, turned upstairs, and walked into Li Tianlan's room. Military counselor waited silently outside, counting the time. Time passed quickly. This time, in less than 20 minutes, Deity had come out again. Go and find that flower. Deity looked at military counselor with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. That flower. That indescribable flower. If he had that flower back then, how could he have no hope of reaching the real invincible realm in this life? Unfortunately, he didn't have it back then. So he could no longer move forward in this life. Deity's figure gradually disappeared, without any reluctance. Although he didn't get that flower back then, he got many years of time. That was the truth. Even if he didn't get enough, it was enough. Military counselor's figure rushed into Li Tianlan's room. The furnishings in the room were extremely empty, without any furniture at all. In the middle, there was a very high ice coffin. The ice coffin didn't look different, but it exuded a unique fragrance. Li Tianlan was lying in the ice coffin, shrouded by some looming white mist in the coffin. He was dressed in white, and his face was ruddy. The sword wound that penetrated his heart on his chest had disappeared. Scarlet divine punishment. The silver legend of Qin. The human emperor, which was broken in two, was placed in the ice coffin with him. Li Tianlan crossed his hands, holding an ancient bronze mirror in his hand. That was the national divine artifact of East Island, Yagami mirror. But at this time, cracks had appeared on the surface of the octagonal mirror one after another, as if the tangible fate had turned into wisps of white mist, wrapping Li Tianlan up. Military counselor hesitated for a long time, and finally reached out to touch the ice coffin in front of him. The ice coffin suddenly cracked, and all the mist in the coffin disappeared in an instant. The coffin turned into pieces of broken ice, fell to the ground, and disappeared in an instant. Li Tianlan's body fell, and military counselor hugged him. Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan in confusion, wondering what the hell was going on. Li Tianlan's face was ruddy and healthy. He still didn't breathe, but his heart began to beat constantly. There's a car outside to take you to the airport. The private plane has been arranged. Take his things and go. Deity's voice seemed to come to military counselor's ears from far away. Thank you. Military counselor suddenly came to his senses and thanked him. In any case, if Li Tianlan could really live, the whole samsara, the Holy Family, owed deity a thank you. Deity was silent for a while, and then said blandly, "Tell your boss Qin that if the Battle of East Island is just the beginning and the small scene she said, then I look forward to the next cooperation." Military counselor packed up Li Tianlan's things and left with Li Tianlan. He didn't respond, and he couldn't respond. According to the plan, the plot of East Island was indeed just the beginning. But the problem was that more than half a month had passed since the final battle of Changdao. Li Tianlan hadn't woken up yet. Qin Weibai hadn't woken up yet, either. The limousine arranged by the Purgatory of Heaven capital in advance was getting farther and farther away in sight. Deity stood on the balcony of his villa, watching the car disappear and eventually become a small black dot. Ziyi, the Prince of East Island in a purple palace dress, nestled in his arms obediently and gently, and looked at the small black dot in the distance like him. They're gone. The black dot in sight disappeared completely. Ziyi moved his body and whispered, exhaling. Deity said yes. Let's sleep. Ziyi's voice became more and more delicate, and her body seemed to be a little soft. She was the most beautiful woman in the royal family. Now that she had turned from a girl to a woman, she exuded a very reserved and delicate charm. I can do it today, maybe, she blushed. Maybe I can succeed today, Deity smiled, picked up Ziyi, and strode to the bedroom. Ziyi obediently put her arms around his neck and bit deity's ear. Do you like a boy or a girl? A boy, of course. Will he really become the crown prince of East Island in the future? The future will be. Yes. I've even thought about the baby's name. Just call him Huawu. I've thought about it for a long time. Huawu. Deity's first son was Huawu. But Huawu died. His second son was also going to be called Huawu. He didn't get the flower back then, but he got many years. Whether the old monk had been partial or not. Deity finally got something. Black and white were about to change between heaven and earth. Military counselor took Li Tianlan through the darkest night and went up to Mount Qingyun. Great Master Wu Wei was sitting in front of Qingyun Temple. He was looking at the flower. The fairyland that had once caused a lot of noise on the internet was no longer there. The white mist had completely disappeared, and all the flowers, plants, and trees on the mountain had withered. The spreading fate compressed the vitality of the mountain to the extreme, condensed Great Master Wu Wei's blood, and finally blossomed into a flower. There was only one flower. A flower that shone with all kinds of colors. Military counselor saw the delicate but vibrant flower from a distance, but he didn't see Great Master Wu Wei until he got closer. Great Master Wu Wei's bright kasaya had become strips of cloth hanging on his body, and blood had soaked the kasaya. His hair was white, and his face was wrinkled. In the dark, the master sat there motionless, like a statue without any sign of life. Military counselor was startled. He hesitated for a moment before asking respectfully, Great Master Wu Wei. The master raised his head. His eyes were dim, but there was a smile on the corner of his mouth. From the final battle of Changdao to tonight. This was the first time he had moved. Pick it off. His tone was soft, and he looked at the flower in front of him. Military counselor looked at the flower in front of the master. This was the flower that deity talked about. It had no leaves or stamens, only petals that shone with illusory colors. This flower, military counselor carefully picked it off, a little confused. It's not a flower. Great Master Wu Wei shook his head wearily. It's the dragon vein. Military counselor's palms shook, and he almost threw the flower to the ground. The real top big shots in Zhongzhou State all vaguely knew that the dragon vein of Zhongzhou State had completely disappeared nearly 2 decades ago. Military counselor also knew that. He never thought that this extraordinary flower turned out to be the so-called dragon vein. How much fate and vitality did this flower represent? Military counselor couldn't imagine it at all. The dragon vein is incomplete. But it's enough to save this young man. Great Master Wu Wei coughed and said in a hoarse voice, Is your boss all right? Military counselor hesitated. He knew that the master in front of him could be regarded as the boss's adoptive father, and the other party's state was not very good, so he told the truth. The boss was in a coma on the night of the final battle of Changdao, and he hasn't woken up yet. Great Master Wu Wei fell silent. Just when military counselor thought that the master had fallen asleep or even died, an old sigh sounded softly. Infatuated child, the most infatuated person was the most heartless. The most heartless. Across the night, Great Master Wu Wei looked into the distance, as if he could see thousands of miles at a glance. Tell her a message for me. Great Master Wu Wei whispered. Military counselor wondered why he was asked to pass the message all day. But he still nodded seriously. Master, please go ahead. You are not you, and he is not him. Why are you so persistent? Great Master Wu Wei said indifferently. Military counselor didn't understand, but he wrote it down carefully. He looked at the dragon vein in his hand and seemed to be in a dilemma. Let him eat it. Great Master Wu Wei whispered, then put him in the main hall. Military counselor said, He tore off the unimaginable fate with his trembling hands one by one and fed them to Li Tianlan. There were 9 petals in total. After putting them into Li Tianlan's mouth, military counselor looked at Great Master Wu Wei in front of him. Master, please. He reached out to the temple gate behind Great Master Wu. Great Master Wu shook his head, and his smile became more serene. I can't move. He said, you go. Military counselor was a little stunned. He wanted to say something but finally asked, why can't I move? Because I have to wait for a while. Great Master Wu coughed and said, hurry up. Hurry up. Military counselor did not dare to delay any longer. He held Li Tianlan and quickly walked into the main hall. There was also an ice coffin in the main hall. Military counselor put Li Tianlan in the ice coffin. After thinking for a while, he walked out of the temple gate. Great Master Wu coughed harder. Seeing military counselor coming out, he just waved his hand and couldn't even say a word. Master. Do you want to go to the hospital? Military counselor looked at the old monk in front of him with some worry. When he first walked into Qingyun Temple as a private person, he was lucky enough to meet Great Master Wu. At that time, he was not the military counselor of Samsara. But Great Master Wu gave him a lot of advice. He had never forgotten this friendship. No need. Great Master Wu coughed for a while and calmed down again. The next step is to wait. Wait? Military counselor was a little confused, but before he had time to ask anything, the thick night was instantly filled with endless brightness. It was not light. It was fog. The vast white fog surged silently in the main hall of the temple gate. The white fog became thicker and thicker, enveloping everything in an instant. In military counselor's eyes, Great Master Wu was disappearing. His figure was completely shrouded in fog. They were less than 2 meters apart, but at this time, they couldn't see anything. The white fog gradually thickened. There were no flowers in front of Great Master Wu. But the roots of the flowers were still there. When they couldn't see it, the roots of the flowers began to disappear bit by bit and eventually returned to the earth. The whole Qingyun Temple seemed to be full of vitality all of a sudden. Colorful colors spread across the whole mountain at a speed visible to the naked eye. The white fog representing the vast fate rolled and swirled in the air, rushed up to the sky in an almost crazy manner, and once again poured into the main hall of the temple gate. White fog was everywhere in the main hall, covering the Buddha statue and extinguishing the blue lamps. There was a sound of breaking. The ancient ice coffin was breaking and dissipating little by little. When all the ice coffins disappeared completely. When Li Tianlan's body floated in the air and was about to fall. In the thick fog. Thousands of miles away, Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan opened their eyes at the same time. Outside the temple gate. Flowers bloomed all over the mountain. Chapter 263. Military counselor clearly heard the sound of flowers blooming. The sound was fragmented and dense. It took root, broke through the soil, sprouted, and bloomed. With weak but irresistible vitality and joy, it spread to every corner of Mount Qingyun. The rich fragrance came to his face. The vast white mist rolled wildly between the mountains and rushed to the main hall behind the gate of the temple. The light of the morning dispelled the deep darkness. The sky gradually brightened. The white mist began to disappear. The dilapidated and desolate Mount Qingyun became prosperous again. In the seemingly eternal and fleeting time, flowers and trees occupied every corner of Mount Qingyun and crowded every road on Mount Qingyun. Unimaginable vitality spread out, and even the walls of Qingyun Temple were blooming with flowers. Military counselor was among them. His sight was full of flowers, like a sea of flowers. It was military counselor's first time to see such a scene. This almost mythical scene, which violated the laws of nature, was all because of fate. It was a mysterious, indescribable, and yet, it was a fate that truly existed. The petals of the dragon vein resurrected Li Tianlan, and the roots revived Mount Qingyun. It was like a miracle. Military counselor's heart was left with only awe. Great Master Wu's body was almost completely wrapped in flowers. His body and face were completely withered like a skeleton, but his weathered and dim eyes were still calm and gentle. He had already expected such a scene that seemed familiar to him. Many years ago, when he extracted the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state and resurrected another person, he seemed to have seen his end and destiny in the unseen world. At that time, he didn't give that person this flower, but he gave him many years. He was impartial. He had a clear conscience. What a dragon vein! Military counselor's trembling voice sounded with excitement. What I see today is really incredible. Great Master is really a god. The white mist became thinner. The resurrected Mount Qingyun showed its true appearance. In the flowers, Great Master Wu Wei smiled weakly and whispered, "Unfortunately, there is no stamen." "What is a stamen?" Military counselor asked. He had noticed the dragon vein just now. It had roots, but no leaves. It had petals, but no stamen. That flower was too strange. It gave military counselor the feeling that it was a broken flower, not complete. Of course, the dragon vein was not complete. Great Master Wu Wei had personally drained the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state and had been trying to reunite it over the years. But there was a Taoist priest who was doing the same thing as him. But it didn't matter. The stamen is the foundation. Great Master Wu Wei replied faintly. Military counselor's heart trembled. He thought of Li Tianlan. He didn't know what happened to Li Tianlan's combat capability in Changdao, but he was not far from Li Tianlan at that time, so he could clearly feel what happened the moment Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm. In just a moment, Li Tianlan directly destroyed all his foundation in exchange for the craziest outbreak. A flower without foundation saves a person without foundation. There seemed to be some relief in Great Master Wu Wei's eyes. He looked at the sea of flowers all over the mountain and whispered, "From now on, Tianlan is his own foundation and the foundation of the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state." Although the dragon vein he regathered was incomplete, it already had a foundation. It really didn't matter how much Xian Xuanzi had mastered. He had become the foundation that carried the destiny of a nation all by himself. He had the dragon vein. In this state, Li Tianlan's destiny was so prosperous that it could be said that it was rare for hundreds of years. Regathered the dragon vein. Reopened the golden age. Great Master Wu Wei looked up at the sky. His vision became gray and blurred, but his smile became clearer. "The most perfect," he said in a low voice. The footsteps sounded inside the temple gate, soft, smooth, and unhurried. Military counselor looked back at once. The thick white mist enveloped the entire Qingyun temple. It was a vast expanse, and he couldn't see anything. Li Tianlan couldn't see him either. He didn't even know where he was at all, nor was he sure of his current state. His mind was full of the sword light that exploded in the air like a waterfall at the last moment of the final battle of Changdao, the white dress that said sorry to him, and the fragrance and warmth of Qin Weibai. After that, there was darkness. The silence was like eternal darkness. There was no thinking, no feeling, no body, not even life and death. There was only silence and darkness. Li Tianlan couldn't feel his existence at all. It could even be said that he had completely disappeared. Nothing existed in the whole world. What awakened his consciousness was the dripping sound of running water. The sound of running water gradually dispelled the silence. His blood began to flow again, and his heartbeat slowly recovered. But his consciousness was still immersed in the deepest darkness. Light began to appear. The vast white mist began to fill every corner of the darkness. The white mist was getting thicker and more dazzling. Li Tianlan finally opened his eyes. There was white mist in his consciousness, and there was still white mist in his sight. It was a vast expanse, and he couldn't see anything. He felt his own heartbeat and felt his own breathing. Everything was there. But at this moment, he wasn't sure if he was still alive. There was a flat expanse in the white mist. Li Tianlan walked quietly. He had spent several days and nights in the desperate and frightening darkness. The environment in front of him couldn't make his mood fluctuate at all. He instinctively wanted to get out of here. A large expanse of white mist kept surging as he walked. It seemed to pour into his body, but it also seemed to pass through his back. The journey seemed long and short at the same time. Li Tianlan walked along the way. The world was quiet. The white mist kept gathering and dispersing. In a trance, Li Tianlan seemed to see a door. The door was very narrow and closed at this time. Wrapped in the white mist, it seemed to have a very sacred feeling. Li Tianlan walked over in silence. He pushed the door in front of him. The vast mist receded like running water. Li Tianlan saw the sunshine and the sea of flowers. He also saw a black cloak standing in the sea of flowers, and the beggar, sitting on the ground, almost drowned by the flowers. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. The dense mist swirled around him, and the morning sunshine sprinkled down with a fragrant smell. The autumn wind blew through the sea of flowers all over the mountains and plains, raising his white clothes. Standing outside the dilapidated temple gate, Li Tianlan chuckled. "You are..." Military counselor also saw Li Tianlan walking out of the temple gate. His first reaction was not the surprise after witnessing a miracle, but a great astonishment that was hard to hide. He looked at Li Tianlan as if he had never seen him before. "Military counselor?" Li Tianlan said softly. His voice was as soft as the white mist surging behind him. It was very gentle, but it had the power to cover heaven and earth. He stood there, but his whole person seemed illusory and real at the same time. Military counselor was speechless for a while. He had seen Li Tianlan before. But now Li Tianlan was completely different from before. His face hadn't changed, his voice hadn't changed, and his clothes hadn't changed. But now he looked indescribably perfect. Yes, perfect. Military counselor had never seen such a perfect man. It was indescribable temperament and style. He stood there, looking the same as before, but at this time, he gave people a feeling of being natural and just right. The most perfect. Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan and suddenly had a feeling of reluctance to look away. "Where's little Bai?" Li Tianlan continued to speak. Military counselor suddenly came to his senses, and there seemed to be some hesitation in his eyes. "The boss is already at the headquarters of Samsara Palace." Military counselor hesitated and whispered. That night, he saw Qin Weibai hand Li Tianlan over to Dawn and saw Qin Weibai turn around. He couldn't understand such a move, but he could feel her determination and sadness when she turned around. "This is Great Master Wu Wei." He calmly changed the subject. "This time, the mysterious deity in East Island and the Great Master saved you together." Li Tianlan's face finally changed a little, but his every move was still extremely charming and perfect. He walked quickly to Great Master Wu Wei and seemed to be a little incredulous. "Great Master Wu Wei. We meet again." Great Master Wu Wei, who Li Tianlan thought was a beggar at first, raised his head. He wore a tattered cassock, and his eyes were quiet and dim. Li Tianlan's eyes were calm, but there was some sadness in them. For the first time, he couldn't connect the old man in front of him with the eminent monk he met for the first time. He didn't say thank you, but looked at Great Master Wu Wei seriously and asked, "Why did you save me, Great Master?" "Destiny chose me." Great Master Wu Wei whispered, "You can't escape." Li Tianlan didn't understand, so he could only remain silent. The light in Great Master Wu Wei's eyes grew dimmer and dimmer, but it never went out. He looked at Li Tianlan and asked, "How do you feel now?" Li Tianlan moved his body casually. In an instant, with him as the center, there was a large tear in the air. Even military counselor had to step back for some distance. "I'm still in the invincible realm." Li Tianlan laughed at himself, and there was some unwillingness in his eyes. He shook his head and said, "It's good to survive. It's okay." Great Master Wu Wei's tone was flat and confident. For Li Tianlan, the current invincible realm was not a good thing, but the so-called hidden danger would eventually disappear. He could regather the dragon vein for Zhongzhou State and reopen a prosperous era for Zhongzhou State. When his life was coming to an end, the last thing he had to do was to accumulate power for the dragon vein. Li Tianlan's problem was not a problem. Because now Li Tianlan was the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state. The stronger the dragon vein was, the stronger Zhongzhou state was, and the stronger Li Tianlan was. His way of accumulating power for the dragon vein was rough and obscure, but it was the most effective. It could be said that from the moment Li Tianlan opened his eyes, Xian Xuanzi, the extraordinary man of Taoism, had already lost. The overall situation of Zhongzhou state was settled. One was bright, and the other was dark. The dragon appeared mysteriously. Chapter 264. Great Master Wu Wei's tone was calm and confident. But Li Tianlan's mood was not optimistic. In the final battle of Changdao, he had forcibly entered the invincible realm with the intention of self-destruction. He had no way out, and naturally, he didn't think about the future. But now when he opened his eyes and saw the colorful world again, it was hard for Li Tianlan to describe his feelings. After the doubts of coming back from the dead, there was only mixed feelings in his heart. No one knew better than him how bad his current state was. Because he was now in the invincible realm. And seriously speaking, he was even stronger than when he was in East Island. But he couldn't make a move. If he made a move, he would die. In East Island, the moment he gave up all the foundation of martial arts, his realm had completely fallen below the 4 realms of martial arts. One could imagine how fragile his body was, which was not even in the chi-controlling realm. The reason why his body did not completely explode under the powerful force at that time was that the vitality stored in his body by the immortality potion provided him with endurance. Now, although he came back from the dead, the huge vitality was gone, but the power was still there. The power of the invincible realm, but the body was not in the chi-controlling realm. In such a situation, Li Tianlan could completely blow up his body if he stamped his feet a little hard, not to mention making a move. In such a bad situation, how could he be completely relieved by Great Master Wu Wei's words? But perhaps because he had died once, Li Tianlan knew more about the value of living, so his expression was still calm. Looking at Great Master Wu Wei, who seemed to be about to run out of oil, Li Tianlan carefully bent down and said calmly, "Thank you for saving my life, Great Master. Saving you is equivalent to saving Zhongzhou state. You shouldn't say thank you." Great Master Wu Wei smiled. The morning wind blew over and blew up his completely dry and lusterless white hair. The master sat in the vibrant flowers, but he looked like a piece of dead wood without any sign of life. Li Tianlan didn't understand the meaning of this sentence, so he simply kept silent. The majestic wind fluttered the corners of his clothes, and his white clothes fluttered. He stood calmly, but vaguely, he seemed to suppress the brilliance of the flowers all over the mountain. There seemed to be only this white robe left on Mount Qingyun, with a dazzling style and bearing, natural and flawless. "Do you know why you live?" Great Master Wu Wei said gently. Li Tianlan shook his head. Grand Master pointed at the cluster of flowers in front of him. "Sit." Li Tianlan sat down. His movements were very slow. Great Master Wu Wei's eyes had turned to military counselor. He smiled and said nothing. There were some things that he could not say, even to military counselor, who could be said to be his own people, or even to Qin Weibai. Even if he already suspected that Qin Weibai seemed to know something. Military counselor nodded knowingly. He looked at Li Tianlan and said, "Your Highness, I'll wait for you at the foot of the mountain." "Sorry for the trouble." Li Tianlan nodded. It was not until military counselor's figure completely disappeared that he turned to look at Great Master Wu Wei and said seriously, "Great Master, please enlighten me. What is karmic luck?" Great Master Wu Wei was not ambiguous. He directly asked a very simple and profound question. Li Tianlan, who was still in a trance and couldn't think calmly from death to life, felt helpless. Karmic luck and destiny were really beyond his understanding. He didn't believe in metaphysics. He wanted to say that karmic luck was luck, but looking at the old monk in front of him who was on the verge of collapse, he shook his head. "I don't know." It was an extremely rare opportunity for a guru to talk about metaphysics. Moreover, this guru had saved his life. He didn't want to jest in front of the guru at all. The so-called karmic luck is actually vitality. The vitality of every grass and every tree, every mountain and every river, every person and every country. Great Master Wu Wei said calmly, everything has vitality. A country has vitality, which is called fate. When the fate of a country is about to run out, the country will die. People have vitality, which is called destiny. When the destiny is over, people will die. If we use another explanation for vitality, it is karmic luck. Li Tianlan didn't know whether his body was too fragile or something else. Sitting in front of Great Master Wu Wei, he felt a little drowsy. A smile flashed in Great Master Wu Wei's eyes, and he continued, mountains and flowers, like people and countries, all have vitality. When all kinds of vitality are integrated together, it will become a vein. People have a pulse, which is related to life and death. The karmic luck composed of the vitality of all living things also has a pulse, which is related to the rise and fall. It can be said to be a dragon vein, an earth vein, or anything else. But one thing is certain. Karmic luck is related to the prosperity of a country and a person, and this most important vein is related to the rise and fall of the whole karmic luck. You can choose not to believe it, but how can you not believe what you see around you? Li Tianlan didn't doubt it. He seemed to be a little more spirited and thoughtful. Dragon vein. He was no stranger to this word. In his suppressed memory, his grandfather Li Honghe seemed to have said something about dragon vein, but he couldn't remember it now. And you are alive because of this vitality, this karmic luck, and this dragon vein. Great Master Wu Wei concluded, I regathered the dragon vein for Zhongzhou state and reopened the prosperous times. In metaphysics, there is a saying that the dragon shows its head but not its tail. In the past many years, the dragon vein has been chaotic and has not been obvious, because it lacks the dragon head. Until today, when I added the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state to you, everything was settled. Now, you are the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state, and also the dragon head. Regathered the dragon vein? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked, that is to say, there was no dragon vein in Zhongzhou state many years ago? It was emptied by me. Great Master Wu Wei said kindly, but Li Tianlan felt a piercing chill in an instant. For a moment, Li Tianlan instinctively didn't dare to ask him what he was going to do by emptying the dragon vein. About 20 years ago, the dragon vein was already decaying, but the karmic luck of Zhongzhou state was still there, so I emptied the dragon vein and regathered it to form a new dragon head and dragon tail. I wasn't born at that time, was I? Li Tianlan finally couldn't help interrupting the great master. So at that time, the dragon head was not you. You were still the dragon tail. Great Master Wu Wei looked at Li Tianlan and suddenly said, do you remember when we met in the Dongqing clan? As I said, more than 20 years ago, someone changed your birth destiny. Li Tianlan froze in place and didn't speak for a long time. The dragon head and the dragon tail are originally interchangeable, and each grabs its own karmic luck. Until today, everything is almost settled. Great Master Wu Wei's tone became more and more indifferent. Almost? Li Tianlan asked in reply. Almost means that the variable is very small, but it still exists. Although the dragon vein regathered, it is not strong after all. It will take about 10 years. Great Master Wu Wei looked at Li Tianlan meaningfully. His eyes were very scary. The head and the tail are not looking after each other, and naturally, they can't coexist. Li Tianlan's heart was a little cold. Also at the meeting in the Dongqing clan, he remembered another sentence that Great Master Wu Wei had said to him. This benefactor has gone against the general trend and forcibly defied heaven. I'm afraid that you will die young and miserably in 10 years at most. 10 years. Li Tianlan opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but Great Master Wu Wei closed his eyes. 2 lines of blood flowed down from his eyes, followed by the nose, ears, and mouth. Dark red blood flowed directly from the master's mouth. The master closed his eyes, but the corners of his mouth, which was bleeding, were gently raised, revealing a disdainful smile. Disdainful. This was the first time that Li Tianlan had seen this kind of emotion in him. It seemed to be contempt. This is, Li Tianlan was suddenly shocked. Karmic luck backfire. I said what I shouldn't say, so it's natural. Great Master Wu Wei opened his eyes again. His eyes became empty and blank, but his tone was still gentle. What else do you want to know? Li Tianlan was a little hesitant, but he didn't dare to ask again. Why did you help me, Great Master? After hesitating for a long time, Li Tianlan finally asked the question he had just asked. I want to regather the dragon vein. It's my destiny. Great Master Wu Wei's answer was almost the same. Your destiny should be to regather the dragon vein, right? And my destiny. He remembered the 10-year prophecy that chilled his heart, and said with a self-deprecating smile, my destiny seems to have been changed. Aren't you helping me on purpose? Impartiality. Great Master Wu Wei's tone grew calmer. But you're still partial after all. Li Tianlan looked at him seriously and said. If he was the so-called dragon tail before, then now he became the dragon head, it must have something to do with Great Master Wu Wei. If he became the dragon head, then who was the dragon tail that would die 10 years later? I gave him a chance. Great Master Wu Wei said calmly, I gave it for many years, but he failed. That's the general trend. The general trend? Li Tianlan asked in reply. The general trend of the dark world, from a metaphysical point of view, fluctuates because of the amount of luck. More and more blood flowed from the corners of Great Master Wu Wei's mouth. He raised his hand to stop Li Tianlan from speaking and continued, the final battle of East Island this time is the biggest turning point and also a beginning. Zhongzhou State was going to lose, but because of your existence, the situation was barely saved, so I could take the opportunity to make you the dragon vein of Zhongzhou State and make you break through. That is to say, Li Tianlan felt a little strange in his heart. That is to say, if I hadn't entered the invincible realm in East Island, now you would lose the most important person, and naturally, you wouldn't be able to become the dragon head. 10 years later, you would definitely die. Great Master Wu Wei said abruptly. Li Tianlan had mixed feelings. He was as strong as the invincible realm in East Island, and his original intention was to save Qin Weibai, that was all. If Qin Weibai hadn't been kidnapped, he wouldn't be as strong as the invincible realm. Then the final winner of the final battle of Changdao, East Island? He seemed to understand something, but he was a little confused, so he said to himself. East Island, of course. Great Master Wu Wei said calmly, in terms of luck, in recent years, East Island can be said to have the most prosperous luck, far surpassing Zhongzhou State and other countries. If not, why do you think the Pope of the Vatican attaches so much importance to the final battle of East Island? And why does he attach so much importance to you? Li Tianlan smiled helplessly. His mind became clearer and clearer, but also more confused. He spread his hands and said, then East Island is now, today is different from the past. Great Master Wu Wei smiled and said, a real heavenly son of East Island died in this final battle, and most of his luck belongs to Zhongzhou State. If he hadn't died, you wouldn't have survived today. He looked at Li Tianlan with empty eyes. Everything is interlinked, and the real battle is just a corner. How can it be possible for the dragon vein to gather in Zhongzhou State without more deaths? At this moment, Li Tianlan had 1,000 words in his heart, but he couldn't say a word. After today, if you achieve something in the future, you might as well make this place your headquarters. Great Master Wu Wei looked at the sky blankly, pointed to Mount Qingyun in front of him, and said softly. Li Tianlan was slightly shocked. He had a hunch, but he couldn't believe it was true. Great Master, you, Li Tianlan's face changed a little. I want to see this landscape. Great Master Wu Wei looked in the direction of the West Lake and said softly. I'll carry you. Li Tianlan said without hesitation. Great Master Wu Wei laughed. He nodded and said softly, okay. Li Tianlan carefully carried the Great Master on his back and went down the mountain. Step by step, he kept his feet on the ground. Great Master Wu Wei leaned on Li Tianlan's back and said softly, "Your current ranking on the divine list is roughly equal to the ranking of Zhongzhou State's luck in the world before the final battle of Changdao. Don't worry. Although I can't do much, I can help you in the end." "Why do you do this, Great Master?" Li Tianlan's heart trembled slightly. "I can live." Great Master Wu Wei said with a smile, "But you can't." He looked ahead and said softly, "Watch the landscape." Li Tianlan wanted to persuade him, but Great Master Wu Wei patted him on the shoulder hard and motioned him not to say more. Li Tianlan, who was in a trance and had mixed feelings, silently carried Great Master Wu Wei and went down the mountain step by step. He carried him. Walking down his mountain was also his mountain. In the bright morning, there was a hint of lethargy on Mount Qingyun. Li Tianlan came to the water's edge with Great Master Wu Wei on his back. The sun shone down, and the water rippled and sparkled. "How many steps?" Great Master Wu Wei suddenly asked with a smile. Li Tianlan froze and didn't speak for a while. 2,000 steps. Great Master Wu Wei pinched Li Tianlan's shoulder and kept exerting force. His voice began to pant, and he said with a low laugh, "Today, you carry me for 2,000 steps, and I will reopen a prosperous land for Zhongzhou State and the Li family for 2,000 years. After that, it will be left to future generations." Li Tianlan didn't think this sentence was so shocking, but he felt a little disappointed. He slowly put Great Master Wu Wei down and faced the West Lake in front of him. The master sat among the flowers and plants and reached out as if he wanted to touch the waves that were neither far nor close. His low murmur came from the wind. It was soft and gentle, but it instantly echoed throughout Mount Qingyun. When the dragon is about to raise its head, remove its armor when it sees the dragon. The voice was dissipating. The master's body also began to dissipate. The cold wind blew over. Starting from the palm, the master's body was blown into pieces piece by piece. The pieces turned into dust and flew with the wind. The cold wind blew over. The vast white mist surrounding Qingyun Temple surged into the air in an instant. The vast white mist enveloped Mount Qingyun again, and eventually the whole lonely mountain. A large amount of fate and vitality seeped calmly and gently into every corner of the mountain. The wind gradually disappeared. The mist gradually disappeared. Li Tianlan stood calmly where he was. The sun shone down. The mysterious Qingyun Temple. The beautiful lonely mountain. All the man-made buildings disappeared completely with the wind. The well-proportioned pavilions, the lonely monasteries, the solemn golden body of the Buddha, disappeared. Completely disappeared. The whole lonely mountain seemed to go back countless years in an instant, becoming the most primitive and prosperous scenery. Great Master Wu Wei's body completely disappeared from the world with the wind. There was only the green mountain in front of Li Tianlan. How charming the green mountain was. His eyes were blank and sad. He stood where he was for a long time without moving. The morning sun gradually turned into a scorching sun and rose high into the sky. A storm suddenly rose on West Lake. A violent, almost suffocating momentum suddenly swept a large area of the lake. Waves rolled on the calm lake. Chapter 265. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the old man who stepped into Lonely Mountain. His eyes were a little dazed. His world was quiet. The surface of the lake was filled with exploding lake water. Water splashed and waves rose. A large area of the lake surged violently like a tsunami in a storm. But there was no sound in Li Tianlan's ears. The world was quiet. He could only hear the sound of the dissipation of the clouds and mist. It was quiet but extremely pleasant. The old man went up Lonely Mountain and stepped directly into Mount Qingyun without stopping. He went all the way up to Li Tianlan in the Sea of Flowers. The clouds and mist on Mount Qingyun completely dissipated. Li Tianlan, who was in the invincible realm but had no force, began to relax. It felt very comfortable. His realm finally began to fall when the clouds and mist completely disappeared. Invincible realm, half-step invincible realm, thunder-shocking realm, fire-flaming realm, ice-condensing realm, chi-controlling realm. It kept falling, and finally, he completely withdrew from the chi-controlling realm. The arrogant old man who climbed the mountain on water walked up to Li Tianlan. He witnessed the process of Li Tianlan's aura from strong to weak. The old man seemed very indifferent most of the time, and his wise eyes were a little complicated. Li Tianlan laughed. His aura was weak, but his demeanor did not weaken a bit. At this moment, his whole body seemed to be shining. His every move was perfect, exuding a kind of dazzling and bright charm. It was not until this moment that Li Tianlan was sure that he really ushered in a new life. So he would laugh. But if he was reborn today, then what did he get in the previous 19 years? He had wind and thunder veins. He used to be invincible, and he was the heavenly son of Zhongzhou state. But now, he was just an ordinary person with wind and thunder veins. Perhaps only those who truly understood martial arts would understand how strange these words were. Li Tianlan's heart was in a mess, and even the excitement of seeing the old man became a lot suppressed. "Grandpa," he called softly. When great master Wu Wei died between heaven and earth, Li Honghe, who should not have appeared here. Li Honghe looked ruddy and energetic. After the border war, he seemed to be more than 10 years younger. Looking at his grandson who was already famous in the dark world at a young age, he smiled with satisfaction. "You did a good job in East Island. How are you? How do you feel now?" Li Tianlan's heart gradually sank all the way to the bottom. Autumn had just arrived and the weather was still very hot. It was noon, but Li Tianlan felt cold all over. Because Li Honghe's current state was too abnormal. The Li family participated in the border battle on the 5th day. Li Tianlan had already heard about it when he was still in East Island. But the news from afar was naturally vague. Without being there, no one knew the impact and consequences of that series of actions. But it was different now. Li Honghe appeared directly in front of him. It was clear at a glance. Li Tianlan was most unfamiliar with this Li Honghe. Whether in spirit or appearance, the current Li Honghe was completely different from before. Li Tianlan knew very well what state Li Honghe was in before. He was nearly 80 years old, and his physical strength was uncontrollably weakening. He could barely maintain the invincible realm, and it was even difficult for him to exert all the strength of the invincible realm. But now Li Honghe was full of energy, and his powerful aura was almost bursting out of his body, which made people feel awe at first glance. In this state, Li Honghe gave Li Tianlan a feeling that he was even more powerful than when Li Honghe was at his peak in his childhood. Li Tianlan's face was pale. He knew very well what this situation meant. The so-called powerful aura bursting out of his body was a sign that the power in Li Honghe's body was completely out of control. "You forced yourself to return to your peak state." Li Tianlan tried not to let his voice tremble. He was melancholy about the death of great master Wu Wei, but in the face of Li Honghe in this state, he felt a little powerless and even desperate. "It's not a big deal." Li Honghe smiled, and his smile was very open-minded. "I do it willingly." "Willingly?" Li Tianlan suddenly raised his voice, and his laughter was a little cold. "For Zhongzhou state. For the border. And for the Li family." Li Honghe looked at his grandson in a calm tone. He could clearly feel the trace of indifference and stubbornness in the depths of Li Tianlan's eyes. "Don't worry." Li Honghe patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder. "I know my body well. Although it's not very optimistic, it's not a problem to support it for a few years. There may be a turnaround by then. Who can tell what will happen a few years later? As for you, can you accept it after your foundation is completely destroyed?" Li Tianlan was full of anger and resentment, but outwardly, he was as cold as an iceberg. He suppressed the worry and even panic in his heart, steadied his breath, and said indifferently, "It's just starting over." Li Honghe's eyes were as gentle as ever, and he whispered, "But this is the second time. So it will be faster than the first time." Li Tianlan's voice was firm and persistent. Li Honghe nodded, took out a cigarette, lit it, and stopped talking. Why are you here? Li Tianlan was silent for a while and suddenly asked. I'm here to see the bald man off. Li Honghe took a deep drag on the cigarette, and his eyes were a little sad. I didn't expect it to be a step too late. This guy. I'm afraid he doesn't want to see me in the end, right? Great Master Wu Wei, who was famous in Zhongzhou State, became bald in Li Honghe's mouth. Li Tianlan was also a little sad. Because Great Master Wu Wei was not bald in the end. What disappeared with his figure in heaven and earth was his long white hair like frost and snow. Li Tianlan sat down. Li Honghe was on his left. And on his right was the place where Great Master Wu Wei died. There was only a piece of rock facing the mountains and rivers. There was no ash, it was clean. You used to be very good friends, right? Li Tianlan asked in a low voice. Li Honghe just said, in silence and didn't say much. Great Master Wu Wei had many secrets, and there were also many secrets between him and the Li family. But everything was in the past. The Great Master had died. His past, his secrets, and his friendship with the Li family had all become stories. Stories. It didn't matter if he didn't listen. The landscape here is clean and suitable for retirement. I like it very much. Li Honghe looked at the landscape in front of him in a trance and said softly. He looked at Li Tianlan, who was so dazzling that no one dared to look directly at him, and said with a smile, how about the Li family take root here from now on? You're in Huading, and it's closer to here. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows in surprise. For a moment, he was not sure what Li Honghe meant. Here. That's it. Li Honghe sat on a flat rock, with his back against the green mountain and his face facing the green water. His figure was small between heaven and earth, but it exuded a kind of strength and majesty that Li Tianlan had never seen before. Li Tianlan was a little excited. He was sure what Li Honghe meant. Grandpa wanted the Li family to get out of the camp in the primeval forest and come to the beautiful Mount Qingyun. Could it be that during his death, the Li family and Zhongzhou State reached a new agreement? Grandpa, are we free? You and Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan's tone was full of undisguised excitement. Don't mention Zhongzhou State. Li Honghe shook his head and said, from now on, the Li family will only live for the Li family. He glanced at Li Tianlan and said with a smile, of course, you're different. I'm old, and you're still young. You must become the god of war of Zhongzhou State in the future. This is the honor that the Li family should have. Li Tianlan was still excited, but he frowned. Grandpa actually wanted to go against the will of Zhongzhou State and forcibly move the Li family to Mount Qingyun? He thought for a moment and said, I'm afraid that Zhongzhou State will find some reason to prevent us from, reason? Li Honghe laughed, and the expression between his eyebrows became more and more dignified. They have been wanting me to go back to Yuzhou to recuperate these years. Now I take the initiative to come out and not go back to Yuzhou. Can't I recuperate in Linwen? And the so-called reason, I listen to it. That's a reason. If I don't listen to it, it's nonsense. At this stage, if I don't let them speak, they won't dare to speak. Li Honghe's tone was calm and confident. It seemed that he had regained his loftiness and dominance when he was the god of war of Zhongzhou State. He said, I like it here. This place belongs to me. The Li family will only live for the Li family from now on. Li Tianlan was excited, but his eyes gradually became gloomy. He understood what his grandpa meant. Li Honghe's current state was extremely bad, but at the same time, he was extremely powerful. The power in his body had been completely out of balance. In the following time, his body would gradually weaken, but his power would grow stronger and stronger. When his power grew to the limit that his body could bear, Li Honghe's whole body would be completely blown up. But this process would not be completed in a day. It needed a relatively slow process. Li Honghe would become weaker and stronger in this process, and the end of this road was death. Only death. No one was willing to provoke Li Honghe in this state, and naturally no one dared to touch the Li family. Because Li Honghe would die, such provocation was completely unnecessary. As long as Li Honghe was still alive, he, who lived only for the Li family, occupied Lonely Mountain, and no one in the whole Zhongzhou state would say a word of nonsense. But what if Grandpa couldn't hold on? Li Tianlan's palms trembled slightly. He didn't know how long this process would take, but he knew very well that it would not be short or too long. At least in this time, it was difficult for him to enter the invincible realm from scratch. At that time, once Grandpa couldn't hold on, and he didn't enter the invincible realm, the Li family without deterrent power would face the shadows and fangs of countless enemies inside and outside Zhongzhou state. Li Tianlan clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes were resolute. Grow up quickly. Li Honghe didn't look at Li Tianlan. He looked at West Lake in his sight and sighed softly. Since I've come to Lonely Mountain, as long as I don't die, there shouldn't be many people who dare to attack you. The next period should be the safest time for you. Come on, the Li family will rely on you in the future. Grandpa, don't worry. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. He rarely said such words, but every time he told Li Honghe to rest assured, Li Honghe would really rest assured. Under the bright and hot sun, the old man chuckled. He looked at Li Tianlan kindly and suddenly asked, "What do you think of me?" Li Tianlan was stunned. "You're my grandpa." He was stunned for a moment, and then he said seriously. That was his evaluation. No evaluation was also an evaluation. Li Honghe remained calm and said with a smile, "In my life, I haven't done many right things, but I've done many wrong things. But many mistakes can be made up for in the end. But some mistakes can't be made up for today, and I can only make the best of them. Tianlan, the thing I'm most proud of is that I have the best grandson, but the most regretful thing is also the same. If I can give you another chance to choose again, you don't have to think about the Li family anymore, and you don't have to think about the responsibility anymore. You can go down the mountain now and be an ordinary person, or go to Samsara Palace and live together with Boss Qin, or there are other choices. Under such circumstances, are you still willing to choose to bear the Li family's past?" Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. Li Honghe said if. But there was no if in life. He said indifferently, "I don't have a chance." "Now you do." Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan. "You can choose to give up your responsibility, and I won't blame you." "Ha!" Li Tianlan looked at the distant sky. His voice was calm and without hesitation. "The thing I'm most proud of is that I have the greatest grandfather. It's true in my heart, and it's true in Zhongzhou state." That was his answer. Li Honghe was great in his heart because of family affection. In Zhongzhou state, he was great because of glory. The glory that he was most proud of. Li Honghe laughed. His smile was not joyful, but a little melancholy. "So, I can only make the best of them." He looked at Li Tianlan and said softly. "Not long after you left, Li Huaqing went to the camp. I asked Wangxing to follow him, and now he should be one of his personal guards. When you return to Huading, you meet him. He has something to give you. When you have time, you can take it to the Dongqing clan." Li Honghe said. Li Tianlan's heart moved. He wanted to ask about the Dongqing clan and Dongqing Rushi, but when the words came to his mouth, he still didn't speak and just nodded. He had already known that Li Wangxing left the camp with the leading cadre of the academics. But when it came to this matter, Li Tianlan remembered another thing. "I have an agreement with Zhuang Huayang. After the final battle of Changdao, I can transfer 3 veterans of the Li family. I'll arrange it." Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan with a quiet smile. Li Tianlan's body trembled slightly. His grandfather didn't allow him to name names but directly said that he would arrange it. It directly touched on a question that he had always wanted to ask but dared not ask. On the 5th day of the final battle of Changdao, the 5 superpowers jointly invaded the border of Zhongzhou state. The Li family, which was no longer at its peak, fought against the 5 superpowers. How many people were left now? How many people are there? Li Tianlan asked in a hoarse voice after a long silence. 63, including me. Li Honghe didn't hesitate and directly gave an accurate number. 10 of them are seriously injured and have lost their combat effectiveness. Li Tianlan's body shook, and then he stood where he was with no expression. 63 people, 10 had lost their combat effectiveness. If he was given 3 more people, the Li family would only have 50 people left. When he left the border camp a few months ago, there were still more than 100 veterans of the Li family in the camp. They said they were veterans of the Li family, but any one of them who could survive to this day could be a general. In the Battle of the Border, the Li family lost more than half of its members. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said calmly, I see. He turned to look at the top of the mountain. In the direction of the top of the mountain, Qingyun Temple no longer existed, and Li Tianlan couldn't see the silver light hidden in the flowers. There's a murderous weapon on the top of the mountain. It's the legend of Qin of the Jiang family of South America. The human emperor is broken, but it's not a loss with the legend of Qin as a supplement. But now the murderous weapon has entered the time of energy storage, so let's put it here first. Li Tianlan said. Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan's arm. He held a scarlet broadsword in his hand. The sword of the founder was called Divine Punishment. Li Honghe was not surprised. As early as in the border battle, he had seen Lin Fengting and this sword. Got it. Li Honghe nodded and said. Let's go. Li Tianlan took a deep look at the old man in front of him. He understood the purpose of the old man's appearance here today. He came to Mount Qingyun to retire from the border camp in such a high-profile way. He said that he lived for the Li family, but in fact, it was more important to protect himself. In the days when his grandfather was constantly getting stronger, his safety was enough to be guaranteed. As for the future, what would happen when his grandfather couldn't hold on and he didn't enter the invincible realm? It was not that his grandfather didn't think of this problem, but he was not qualified to think about it. For so many years, the Li family had never had a future. The so-called future could only be discussed in the future. Li Tianlan didn't say any more words of concern. Everything was doomed. What was doomed would no longer be meaningful. He knelt down in front of Li Honghe and kowtowed heavily a few times. Then he straightened up and went straight down the mountain. Li Honghe watched Li Tianlan's back leave, and there was obvious relief in his eyes. Today's meeting was out of his plan. Li Tianlan's identity was exposed so quickly, and it was also out of his plan. Under the overturning of the general trend, there were too many accidents. But Li Honghe saw Qin Weibai's shadow in the general trend. So he acquiesced to these accidents. There was no other reason. That was because his instincts told him that the perfect and dreamy woman was unreal. She was worth trusting. The rarest thing in the world was worth it. The old man looked at Li Tianlan's back calmly. Farther and farther away. Farther and farther away. Life was long, and the sky was big. There would be shadows in your life, but there would also be light. The old man slowly turned around and walked toward the top of the mountain. The old man and the young man, the grandfather and the grandson, went in opposite directions. It was like their respective destinies. The young man was reborn. Chapter 266. Military counselor was waiting for him at the foot of the mountain. He witnessed the monstrous waves when Li Honghe climbed the mountain and the magical changes when the clouds dissipated. Now, the waves had disappeared and the changes had stopped. Bright and beautiful sunlight shone down from the sky, blowing the grass and trees in the mountains. Under the clear sky, the mountains were swaying and the water was turbulent. Lonely Mountain was still Lonely Mountain, but as Feiyun left, this island in the middle of the lake lost all of its worldly aura. It was filled with flowers and grass, pure and natural like a paradise. Li Tianlan walked over from the landscape. His white clothes seemed to blend perfectly with the landscape. Your Highness. Military counselor subconsciously used the honorific title. In the Battle of Changdao, Li Tianlan's performance was enough to deserve this title. And his attitude toward Qin Weibai also made the 12 super masters of samsara truly acknowledge his existence. But the boss's attitude, the military counselor lowered his head, and his eyes were a little unfocused. "Call me by my name," Li Tianlan said calmly. The military counselor did not say anything. He still maintained a slightly respectful posture. Li Tianlan turned to look at Lonely Mountain behind him. Lonely Mountain stood out on the gentle and charming lake, but the old man on the top of the mountain had disappeared. This was the Li family's Lonely Mountain. A trace of firmness flashed in Li Tianlan's eyes. He turned around and said, "Back to Huading." Into the water. They disembarked. West Lake, which was usually full of people, was officially blocked off by the government because of the rumor of the fairyland. Along the way, the surrounding scenery was cold and empty. A well-behaved Audi was parked on the side of the road. The driver was a mute. When he saw military counselor and Li Tianlan, he bowed silently and motioned for them to get in the car. Military counselor and Li Tianlan sat in the back seat together. The mute man started the car and drove into the streets of Linpen, heading straight for Huading. Li Tianlan looked at Lin and outside the window. The battle at the border was filled with smoke, and the trip to Changdao was filled with blood. But now, under the sun, Zhongzhou state was still prosperous. Li Tianlan's mind began to clear up little by little. "I have a question." He suddenly spoke. His words were simple and straightforward. He was not familiar with the military counselor, but he was too lazy to test him. If he had any doubts, he would just ask. Military counselor subconsciously touched his chest. There was a letter in his arms. He sighed softly and smiled. "There are many things that I can't say. And there are many things that I don't know the truth about." The answer was direct but vague. Li Tianlan remained calm and said, "What does the Samsara Palace want to do?" He had a lot of questions he wanted to ask, but in the end, he asked one that the military counselor would definitely know. "I can't say." Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan. His expression couldn't be seen under the cloak, but his tone was sincere. "Your Highness, this is an internal matter of our Samsara Palace. And now you are the young governor of Sai City." Li Tianlan suddenly fell silent. "So, I have nothing to do with Samsara anymore?" After a long time, Li Tianlan continued to ask. Military counselor hesitated for a moment, reached into his chest pocket, and said softly, "Your Highness, Samsara has now completely withdrawn from Zhongzhou state." He took out an envelope from his pocket and continued, "Boss asked me to give this to you." Qin Weibai's coma was not far from Li Tianlan's death. Therefore, this letter could only have been written before. The letter had been in his arms for too long. Li Tianlan took the envelope, opened it, and pulled out a piece of white paper. The handwriting on the paper was delicate but slightly messy. There was no name, no signature, only a simple and clear sentence. "I wish you a bright and promising future for the rest of your life. Your future has nothing to do with me anymore. Nothing to do with him anymore." Li Tianlan felt a sharp pain in his heart, as if a bloody scar suddenly appeared on his beating heart. It was painful and sour, and he was unwilling to give up. His face was a little pale. The light outside the window shone on the paper through the window, with a kind of desperate pale. Li Tianlan read this sentence over and over again. After being reborn, he didn't know what he had gained, but he clearly felt that he was losing. Li Honghe had reached a dead end. He was about to lose the pillar that could support everything in his heart since he was a child. At the same time, he would also lose the future related to her. Li Tianlan folded the letter. Very slowly. He put the letter into his pocket without expression and glanced at military counselor. "Thank you." He said this in a deep and heavy tone. Military counselor shook his head. He didn't know the content of the letter, but he had a hunch that it would not be good news. Li Tianlan stopped talking. He leaned back in the seat behind him and closed his eyes. Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan and continued to remain silent. He was the saber-bearer of Samsara in Zhongzhou state. But now the sword was not out of the sheath, how could the saber dare to show its edge? The sunrise on the sea was the most magnificent. The setting sun on the sea was the most poignant and beautiful. The sun was setting. Qin Weibai sat quietly by the sea, looking at the sunset in the deep sea with a confused look in her eyes. She woke up from a long coma. Her delicate and perfect face was slightly thin, and she seemed to be in a trance. A blue fishtail dress clung to her body gently. She held her curled-up legs with both hands and looked quietly at the sunset and the sea at the end of her sight. She was like a mermaid who longed to return to the sea after coming ashore, confused and delicate. Flaming fire stood motionless behind Qin Weibai. She was carrying a small fruit basket in her hand. In the fruit basket were Qin Weibai's favorite fruits, snacks, and water. But none of them had been touched for the whole afternoon. There was some worry in Flaming Fire's eyes. Since the boss woke up, she had not said a word except for asking the time. She seemed to be in a trance or recalling something. In this state, the boss seemed to reject the whole world. Her sadness and joy had nothing to do with the whole world. Flaming Fire disliked Li Tianlan more and more. In the final battle of Changdao, Flaming Fire approved of Li Tianlan's way of doing things, but she just disliked him. Because all the changes began when the boss met Li Tianlan. She had quickly and willingly turned from a high and mighty goddess into a little woman. She was no longer pure. She had sorrow and joy, sorrow and anger. Flaming Fire did not understand such emotions. How good it would be if life could always be peaceful. Flaming Fire looked up at the surroundings. This was an island, surrounded by the deep sea. When the wind and the waves were calm, the serene and gentle sound of the waves could be heard everywhere, as if they would last forever. This was the headquarters of the Samsara Palace, the place that could make everyone calm down the most. But Flaming Fire was a little confused. The sun was setting. The sea breeze was blowing. Flaming Fire hesitated and wanted to persuade the boss to go back. At least she should change her clothes, but she did not dare to disturb her. The phone rang abruptly. Flaming Fire took out her mobile phone and looked at the number. She raised her eyebrows slightly and walked directly toward Qin Weibai without hesitation. "Boss, military counselor is calling," Flaming Fire said softly. She knew that Qin Weibai had been waiting for this call. Qin Weibai reached for the phone and pressed the answer button, but she did not speak. "Boss." On the other end of the phone, military counselor said calmly, "Great Master Wu Wei has left. He asked me to tell you something." Qin Weibai listened to military counselor's words. There was a flash of sadness in her crystal eyes, and then she said, "How is Tianlan?" "Very good. There should be no sequelae." Military counselor replied cautiously. "Where's the letter?" Qin Weibai continued to ask. "I gave it to him," military counselor said. Qin Weibai did not speak. She quietly squeezed the phone hard, and her delicate knuckles were a little white. Military counselor was silent for a while, then whispered, "He said thank you." The sound of the waves around seemed to be louder. The tide rose and fell. Qin Weibai silently hung up the phone and gently bit her red lip. Flaming Fire. She shouted and said faintly, "He's angry." Flaming Fire did not speak. "That's true. He's such a proud man, but I wrote him that letter. He must think that I'm not obedient enough and not well behaved enough. He's really angry." Qin Weibai looked at the sea in the distance and smiled softly, but she could not stop her tears from flowing down. She was so beautiful, so sad, and so stubborn. But it's better than letting him hate me. Qin Weibai remembered the night of the 7th day in Changdao. She remembered the starry sky she saw in Li Tianlan's arms. The starry sky was bright. Qin Weibai's body trembled slightly. Her heart was twitching and hurting, but her eyes became calm and clear little by little. I don't understand. Flaming Fire's voice was very soft, but there was anger in her eyes. That was anger against Li Tianlan. Of course you don't understand. Qin Weibai shook her head and wiped her tears. On this island, she seemed to be particularly weak. I don't understand Li Tianlan. I don't understand the boss either. Flaming Fire's mood did not fluctuate at all. She said quietly, I've been with the boss for a long time, but I never understood what the boss wanted. In the afterglow of the setting sun, Qin Weibai smiled softly, like a poem or a painting. She looked up at the sky. The cloudless sky was blue and pure, and the setting sun emitted orange light, rendering the sky gorgeous and beautiful. The light fell from the high sky, clear and bright, without any shadow. Qin Weibai looked at it quietly, as if she was looking at Li Tianlan. Her eyes were full of affection. Affection was a kind of power. Extreme and crazy. Flaming Fire would not understand. Maybe no one would understand. What she wanted was actually very simple. Chapter 267. After sending Li Tianlan to the Sky Academy, military counselor left. With his current identity, it was not appropriate for him to appear in a sensitive place like the Sky Academy. In the final battle of Changdao, Samsara Palace had drawn a clear line with Zhongzhou State and even stood on the opposite side. Although the super masters of Samsara did not attack the team of Zhongzhou State, they stood with the people of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and asked Wang Tianzong to leave Heaven Capital. No matter how detached Beihai Province and the Wang family of Beihai were, they belonged to Zhongzhou State. This was a fact that no one could change. What Samsara Palace did was not treason. After all, they did not belong to Zhongzhou State. But the change of their position was undoubtedly equivalent to standing on the opposite side of Zhongzhou State. For Zhongzhou State, the current military counselor could be said to be an enemy. Li Tianlan watched military counselor leave. The black Audi was getting farther and farther away. He knew very well that there must be a different scene in the car now. When he wore a cloak, he was military counselor. After taking off the cloak, who would know who he was? Li Tianlan did not know and did not ask. Because all this had nothing to do with him anymore. Li Tianlan slowly turned around. After a few months, he returned to the Sky Academy again. The monumental boulder still stood on the land without a gate of the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan saw his name at the top. He looked at it for a long time, and no one knew what he was thinking. The autumn wind was bleak, and the sun was setting. In the twilight, the wind blew to the south. Li Tianlan turned around and walked south. His spotless white clothes fluttered in the wind. His pace was neither fast nor slow. He walked forward leisurely, like a cloud on the ground. The Sky Academy was quiet. At this time, all kinds of theory classes and actual combat classes were about to end. Li Tianlan walked to the political department. The final battle of Changdao had not been long. It had been more than a month. But after the general trend came to an end, it was easy to have agitation. If he wanted to know what had happened in the past month, he naturally had to find an insider. Tribulation, the minister of the political department, and Zhuang Huayang could be regarded as such. Li Tianlan did not need to hesitate at all to find between the two. The office building of the political department was located in the center of the Sky Academy. When he walked here, the quiet Sky Academy finally became a little livelier. Teachers and students shuttled around. A class that had just finished its class walked out of the training ground in a neat line and passed by the political department. Li Tianlan looked around and didn't find any familiar figures in the crowd. Then he ignored them. But when he looked at the others, they also looked at him. In the evening, the political department suddenly quieted down. Even the advancing troops stopped in their tracks. The leading teacher stared at Li Tianlan with a look of disbelief. Li Tianlan might not know him, but he would never forget Li Tianlan. His name was Zhou Zhou, and he was in charge of the firearms shooting course of an ordinary class. On the first day Li Tianlan came to the Sky Academy, Zhou Zhou was one of the 2 teachers sent to test Li Tianlan. That test was humiliating and tragic. In order to save his other companion, he was almost nailed to the tree by Li Tianlan from a distance of tens of meters. He had just recovered from his injuries over the weekend, and today was his first day teaching a student. Then he saw Li Tianlan. Zhou Zhou's face was pale. He was confused and instinctively afraid. Everyone knew that Li Tianlan had died in Changdao. The Sky Academy held a farewell party for him, and President Li Huaqing personally engraved his name on the monument. When everything was settled, he actually reappeared in the Sky Academy. Zhou Zhou even felt that he had really seen a ghost. In his sight, the man in white didn't stop and went straight to the office building of the political department. More and more people behind him noticed Li Tianlan. The silence and dullness gradually disappeared. Chaotic discussions rang out. Li Tianlan. Today, the 9th person on the divine list, the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State who should be remembered by everyone, reappeared in the Sky Academy. With doubts and uncertainty, the news quickly swept across the whole Zhongzhou State like a hurricane. Compared with the teaching office of the Sky Academy, the political department had more power, but it was relatively more decentralized. However, one thing was clear, that the teaching office's scope of work was for students, while the political department's main scope of work was for teachers. In addition, the credit statistics of students and the task system of the Sky Academy were also the main work of the political department. Therefore, in the Sky Academy, the political department had the largest staff composition. In a 3-story building that looked very old, there were nearly 60 people working inside. At dinner time, the building of the political department was quiet. A man in his 30s in a military uniform passed by Li Tianlan, glanced at him, and asked with some doubts, "Who are you looking for?" "Is Minister Situ here?" Li Tianlan asked. Tribulation's full name was Situ Wanjie, but this name had been called less and less nowadays. "You are." Even if he was a hero, not everyone knew him. The man in front of him obviously didn't know Li Tianlan. His eyes became more and more doubtful and even vigilant. Li Tianlan was definitely not a teacher of the Sky Academy at his age, and he was dressed in white, so he didn't look like a student. Anyone who didn't know him would doubt his identity. "I am..." Li Tianlan opened his mouth, but before his voice died away, there was a sudden crisp sound of documents falling on the stairs. The heavy folder fell to the ground, and countless documents were scattered. Qin Ku, the deputy director of the teaching office, who had a bad relationship with Li Tianlan at the beginning, stood behind the flying documents and looked at Li Tianlan with a shocked and dull face. Li Tianlan was also stunned. "Director Qin." The man in the military uniform who stopped Li Tianlan greeted her inexplicably. He pointed at Li Tianlan and said, "This person is going to..." Qin Ku, who was as cold as an iceberg in front of everyone, suddenly came to her senses. "It's okay. Leave it to me. You go ahead." The man in the military uniform nodded, glanced at Li Tianlan, and turned to leave. "Hello, teacher." Li Tianlan greeted her calmly. The shock in Qin Ku's eyes grew stronger. She personally participated in the final battle of Changdao and also saw Li Tianlan's end. On the 7th night of the final battle of Changdao, the woman in white directly pierced Li Tianlan's heart with her sword without any hesitation. Such a serious injury. How on earth did he survive? Good luck. Li Tianlan seemed to see Qin Ku's doubts. Luckily survived. Is Marshal Uncle here? Yes, yes. Qin Ku responded in a daze, and then squatted down to sort out the documents in a hurry. He's talking to the headmaster in the office on the 2nd floor. You can go directly. Qin Ku responded with a little confusion in her mind. Looking at Li Tianlan who went directly upstairs, she felt dazzled for a moment. How did he suddenly become beautiful? Qin Ku looked at Li Tianlan seriously. She forced herself to calm down and said softly, "Young governor, welcome back." "Thank you." Li Tianlan nodded and went directly to the 2nd floor. The minister's office was facing the stairs. Li Tianlan walked to the door and knocked. "Come in." The next second, the air around seemed to vibrate, and Tribulation's voice almost sounded in his ears. In fact, although the director of the political department of the Sky Academy had no clear rank, it was more than enough to have a full-time secretary. But Tribulation refused such an arrangement at the beginning. In addition, the office was soundproof. If it weren't for Tribulation's terrifying strength, he would have to open the door in person every time someone came. Li Tianlan opened the door and walked in. The large office was decorated comfortably and luxuriously. Tribulation's predecessor, Yi Fengcheng, was obviously a person who knew how to enjoy life. On the sofa diagonally facing the door, Li Tianlan saw the headmaster of the Sky Academy at a glance. Zhuang Huayang was sitting on the sofa at this time, talking to the young man beside him. The moment Li Tianlan walked in, the three of them froze almost at the same time. Zhuang Huayang even thought that he was wrong. He shook his head hard and looked at the young man who walked into the office. After a long time, he said incredulously, "Tianlan." Tribulation calmed down after a short period of astonishment. He was not surprised or excited about Li Tianlan's resurrection. His eyes were calm and gentle as if he had known all this. "It's good that you're back," he said. Li Tianlan was also in a daze. He looked at Tribulation in front of him. A Tribulation who was completely different from his impression. The familiar black clothes turned into comfortable casual clothes. Tribulation took off the silver mask that covered his face all year round, revealing a pale but sharp and hard face. He had short hair and was so thin that he could even be said to be thin. Sitting there, he gave people an unparalleled impact. This was a man as sharp as a sword. "Come and sit down." Tribulation waved his hand and took off the mask. His voice was still low, but it was no longer hoarse, with a very pleasant magnetism. Li Tianlan walked over and sat opposite Zhuang Huayang. He looked at Zhuang Huayang, who was still in a daze, and nodded. "Headmaster, long time no see." Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath. He looked at Li Tianlan and then at Tribulation, who was unusually calm. "What the hell is going on? You're not dead?" He looked at Li Tianlan and asked. "I've been dead." Li Tianlan gave a simple answer. "Come back from the dead?" Zhuang Huayang looked incredulous. "That's the truth." Li Tianlan looked indifferent. "Let's not talk about this." Tribulation suddenly opened his mouth. He was calm as if nothing had happened. He said slowly, "Tianlan, the headmaster and I are discussing the three most critical things in the special warfare system of Zhengzhou State in recent days. They are all related to you. Listen." Chapter 268. Zhuang Huayang was obviously not in the mood to continue discussing business. In other words, Li Tianlan's sudden appearance shocked him more than anything else. Li Tianlan's heart was pierced by a sword. The whole dark world had witnessed it. But now he appeared in front of him again. Tribulation's unusual calmness had already shown that he knew Li Tianlan's state in advance. What did that mean? The atmosphere in the office was very quiet. Zhuang Huayang felt uneasy for no reason. He always felt that he had overlooked something very important in this series of things, but he couldn't tell what it was. "How did you survive?" Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan and asked with a very serious expression. "Do I have to give an explanation for the fact that I'm still alive? Who should I give an explanation to?" Li Tianlan asked in reply. His tone was calm and without any emotion. But not only Zhuang Huayang, but also Tribulation looked at Li Tianlan in surprise. This rhetorical question was too offensive. Although the tone was calm, it couldn't hide the impatience. The two looked at Li Tianlan at the same time. Li Tianlan sat there quietly. After dying and coming back to life, he was indeed much more dazzling than before. But under the absolutely perfect appearance, the two could clearly feel Li Tianlan's uncontrollable bad mood at the moment. Like an active volcano covered with snow, it looked calm and cold, but the magma inside had already completely boiled. Li Tianlan seemed to be aware of his attitude. He took a deep breath, kept silent for a while, and then said calmly, "Sorry, I'm not in a good mood." "It doesn't matter." Zhuang Huayang smiled gently. He didn't pursue the secret of Li Tianlan's resurrection. He just chuckled and said, "It's good to be alive." He paused and continued, "Now Zhongzhou state is more lively." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked, "What do you mean?" Zhuang Huayang shook his head and glanced at Tribulation. Tribulation didn't want to speak. The old headmaster said helplessly, "How are you now? How much combat strength do you have when you were in Changdao?" In fact, when one's martial arts strength reached their realm, his perception ability was extraordinary. Even if he couldn't directly determine a person's realm, he could feel the strength of the other person from his essence, qi, and spirit. But Li Tianlan was different. From the moment he walked into the office until now, all he had shown was perfection. The concentration of essence, qi, and spirit was neither high nor weak. It was almost like a false perfection. "You're lucky to be alive. What's the point of talking about combat power?" Li Tianlan was a little self-deprecating. Thinking of what he was about to lose and what he might not get in the future, his eyes were a little bitter. "I can only start over." "Is that so?" Zhuang Huayang was silent. He was not surprised by this result. The final battle of Changdao could be said to be the heaviest loss that Zhongzhou state had suffered in the Dark World in recent years. Thousands of elites fought one after another, but in the end, less than 100 people came back alive. Under the sudden change of the situation, the final battle was too hasty and chaotic. Zhongzhou state could only get the process and the final result of the final battle from the reports of the survivors. Among them, the news about Li Tianlan was the most important. Zhuang Huayang had read many reports, and he could roughly imagine how powerful this kind of extreme outburst was at the cost of one's life. As Li Tianlan said, it was already a miracle that Li Tianlan could survive after being pierced by a sword under that kind of extreme outburst. It was unrealistic to expect Li Tianlan to maintain his combat capability. To put it simply, Li Tianlan's foundation was completely destroyed, and his martial arts fell to the bottom. Recultivate. He could only recultivate. Zhuang Huayang sighed softly. Thinking of the recent actions of Kunlun City and the attitude of the Wang family of Beihai, combined with Li Tianlan's resurrection and his current identity, he suddenly had a headache. Everything was still calm at the moment. But it was not hard for him to imagine how turbulent Zhongzhou state would be after Li Tianlan walked out of this door. "Tianlan, what's your attitude towards Samsara Palace?" Zhuang Huayang suddenly asked in a low tone. Samsara Palace. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. There was no doubt that Samsara Palace was one of the three things that Tribulation just mentioned. Zhongzhou state's plot against East Island started with cooperation with Samsara Palace. But no matter from the process or the outcome, what Samsara Palace did this time was a betrayal to Zhongzhou state. When the 5 invincible realm experts broke out of Huading, the master of Samsara Palace, who should have appeared, did not show up, which directly led to the lack of defense in Huading. When Wang Tianzong, who went to the border, rushed back to Huading, Gu Xingyun had been seriously injured, and most of the elites of the 5 superpowers trapped in the Sky Academy had also escaped from Huading. It was no exaggeration to say that although the final battle was in Changdao, Huading was the key. In the chaos that day, if the master of Samsara Palace could join hands with Gu Xingyun, they could unite with the third batch of people of Zhongzhou state that should have helped Changdao. Even without Wang Tianzong, Zhongzhou state would not have a big problem to suppress that turmoil. If the 5 invincible realm experts hadn't left Huading, East Island wouldn't have become so confident. If the general trend was still under the control of Zhongzhou state, the 5 superpowers in Changdao wouldn't have joined hands with East Island, and Zhongzhou state wouldn't have suffered such a serious loss. The combat capability of a top 5 invincible realm expert on the divine list was too crucial. The master of Samsara Palace stood by and even disappeared suddenly, which directly led to the situation going completely out of control. And several super masters of samsara in Chengdao also watched the whole battle coldly in the final battle. In the end, they even joined hands with the people of the purgatory of heaven capital. Such an obvious betrayal, no matter how happy the cooperation between the two sides was before, it couldn't be salvaged. It was not hard to imagine Zhongzhou State's attitude towards Samsara Palace. Li Tianlan thought of something and asked directly, "What about Zhongzhou State? What's Zhongzhou State's attitude towards Samsara Palace?" He looked at Zhuang Huayang with calm eyes, but there was a looming sharpness behind the calmness. "Kill." Zhuang Huayang looked into Li Tianlan's eyes without flinching, as if he wanted to see his heart. Zhongzhou State has reached a resolution at the last high-level meeting to completely list Samsara Palace as a hostile force of Zhongzhou State. Kunlun City has launched a hunting order against the 12 super masters of Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai, and all the people of Samsara Palace, and it has been issued to all the special warfare agencies inside and outside Zhongzhou State. This hunting order will also be issued to the mission systems of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy in the near future. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Tribulation, with a pale face, looked down at the ground under his feet, as if he had fallen asleep. Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan, looking a little nervous. He wasn't afraid of anything, but the nervousness mixed with worry and love. Everyone felt sorry for Li Tianlan's death, but they couldn't say anything. But now Li Tianlan was alive. With his entanglement with Samsara Palace, what would he think of Zhongzhou State's attitude towards Samsara Palace? Li Tianlan's foundation was now completely ruined, but he still had unlimited potential. It sounded like a tragedy to recultivate twice, but once Li Tianlan was allowed to rise again in this case, his achievements would be completely limitless. Zhuang Huayang really didn't want such a genius to part ways with Zhongzhou State. But even heroes had a weakness for beauties. Li Tianlan was not a hero. Qin Weibai was not an ordinary beauty either. Tianlan, Zhongzhou State's loss this time is too heavy. What Samsara Palace did this time directly hurt the vitality of Zhongzhou State's special warfare system. Whether from a face or a practical point of view, we can only be enemies with Samsara Palace. We won't stop until one of us is dead, and there's no turning back. Zhuang Huayang's voice was getting lower and lower. He looked at Li Tianlan, and his tone seemed to be both comforting and warning. Li Tianlan still didn't speak. Zhuang Huayang became more and more uneasy. In fact, Samsara Palace's betrayal this time also brought considerable trouble to the academics. Because in the past few years, the cooperation between Zhongzhou State and Samsara Palace had always been secretly led by the academics. Samsara Palace's betrayal had a great impact on the reputation of the entire academics, especially President Li Huaqing of Zhongzhou State, who was extremely embarrassed and passive in this incident. When Kunlun City was the first to propose revenge against Samsara Palace, in order to reverse the passive situation, the academics was the first to express support. Then the Southeast group seconded, the Prince group seconded, the North group had no opinion, and even the Giant group acquiesced to the result of this matter. But now, Li Tianlan was alive. The problem suddenly became a little complicated. Everyone knew the deep love between Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai. But now Li Tianlan was the young governor of Sai City. After Samsara Palace parted ways with Zhongzhou State, the academics, which was not strong in the special warfare system, paid more attention to the cooperation with Sai City. If Li Tianlan's attitude towards Samsara Palace could not be consistent with that of Zhongzhou State, the relationship between the academics and Sai City would immediately become subtle. Zhuang Huayang suddenly thought of something and said casually, "Tianlan, when Zhongzhou State decided to pursue and retaliate against Samsara Palace, the leading cadre also asked for Senior Li's opinion, and Senior Li seemed to support it. After all, Li Honghe was the former war god of Zhongzhou State, and this time he made a great contribution at the border. It was completely reasonable to ask for his opinion." Zhuang Huayang mentioned Li Honghe. It also vaguely reminded Li Tianlan not to forget the Li family and his origin. Li Tianlan glanced at Zhuang Huayang. An indifferent and calm look. Zhuang Huayang felt cold all over his body for no reason. What's Zhongzhou State's attitude toward me? Li Tianlan asked. There seemed to be a storm gathering between his calm eyebrows, which was so oppressive that people could not breathe. You're the young governor of Sai City. You're the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State. Zhongzhou State is satisfied with you. If you hadn't turned the tide at the last minute, the situation would have been worse this time. Even Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong would have been in danger. You've made a contribution to Zhongzhou State. Everyone is very happy that you can come back. Zhuang Huayang said without hesitation. He said a lot, but in fact, it sounded like he didn't say anything. This was not bullshit. This was the legendary official tone. Li Tianlan smiled, full of sarcasm. What I said is true. Zhuang Huayang braced himself, but his smile was a little bitter. It's no exaggeration to describe your contribution this time. The Academy gave the East Emperor Palace a one-time reward of 100,000 credits. At present, Zhongzhou State is studying the level of the East Emperor Palace. It's very likely to completely cancel the level of the East Emperor Palace and let you develop freely. That is to say, if there is no accident, as long as you want, you can graduate from the Sky Academy in advance. Oh, no accident? Li Tianlan asked. Zhuang Huayang spread his hands, and his expression became more and more helpless. Obviously, he knew that there must be an accident in this matter. If Li Tianlan died, there would be no accident. But now Li Tianlan was alive. Neither the Wang family of Beihai nor Kunlun City could let Li Tianlan have a force that could develop freely now, nor could they let him graduate in advance. There are two more things. Li Tianlan said calmly. Zhongzhou State retaliated against the Samsara Palace, which could definitely be regarded as a major event in the special warfare system. But what were the other two things? Well, tribulation broke through the invincible realm. Leading cadre thinks it's time for Sai City to take more responsibility. More responsibility meant more power. If Sai City, which had two invincible realm experts, still defended Mount Taibai as usual, it was indeed a little inappropriate. But Li Tianlan didn't think it had much to do with him. He was now the young governor, not the governor. What was the use of discussing with him about the overall road and future planning of Sai City? I don't seem to be in charge of this kind of thing, do I? Li Tianlan asked directly. But you're in the Sky Academy. Zhuang Huayang said with a smile. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and then understood. He was in the Sky Academy. Then tribulation couldn't leave here. After he killed evil, tribulation would become the only assassin of the invincible realm in the dark world. So his current position was undoubtedly a waste of talent. Zhuang Huayang talked to him about this matter, essentially to test his plan. He had 100,000 credits in hand, and the next 3 years of absenteeism would not deduct 1/10 of it. If he had other plans and didn't intend to continue to attend classes, it would be meaningless for tribulation to stay here. The academics was now cooperating with Sai City. From the perspective of the academics, it was in their best interest for tribulation to leave the Sky Academy for a more important position. Zhuang Huayang should have been talking to tribulation about this before, but his martial uncle seemed to have known that he would come back, so he had not made a clear statement. Understanding this, Li Tianlan nodded without hesitation and said, if I can't graduate in advance, I'll ask for a long vacation. Zhuang Huayang nodded and said calmly, I'll personally approve your leave. The third thing? Li Tianlan asked again. The third thing is the battle for the position of General of 9 Regions, Spirit Tortoise. Zhuang Huayang rubbed his temples, as if he had a headache. There are only a few candidates at present, and there is a big debate. Jiang Shan has now resigned from his position in the Terracotta Army. The new Spirit Tortoise has demands in all aspects. Since you're here, I can ask for your opinion. It has something to do with me. Li Tianlan looked at Zhuang Huayang, a little surprised. Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Spirit Tortoise. The most neutral general of 4 spirits in Zhongzhou State controlled the most mysterious Terracotta Army in Zhongzhou State. He already knew that Jiang Shan, the general of 9 regions with the code name Spirit Tortoise, was going to retire when he was in Changdao, and he also knew the candidates for this position. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and Jiang Shangyu. The 4 leaders inside the Terracotta Army had obviously entered the rhythm of replacing the old with the new. Finding a relatively young person to join their leadership team was conducive to the smooth transition of the Terracotta Army in the future. But Li Tianlan didn't think he could intervene in this matter. If his strength was still there, he could compete with the 3 candidates. But now, his foundation was completely destroyed, and he had to start from scratch. How could he make any waves? The position of Spirit Tortoise. Was this part of the greater responsibility that Sai City had to bear? It has something to do with the people around you. Zhuang Huayang shook his head. He was silent for a while and said softly, "At present, the 2 most competitive people have something to do with you. One is Li Wangsheng, and the other is Su Chu. If there is no accident, the new Spirit Tortoise will be produced between these 2 people. Who do you prefer? Li Wangsheng? Su Chu?" This was definitely an unexpected answer. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai will have more important goals in the near future. They will give up the competition for Spirit Tortoise. The position of Spirit Tortoise is a bargaining chip for them to win the support of the academics. Zhuang Huayang said. Li Tianlan stood up and walked out of the window. Outside the window, it was already night. The night was dark. Li Tianlan looked at the darkness outside the window. After a long time, he nodded and said, "I see." He didn't ask about the so-called goals of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai, nor did he express his position. He just simply said, "I see." This was his attitude. No attitude was also an attitude. Don't you want to know what Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai are planning? The future of their cooperation this time is uncertain. But if the news of your resurrection gets out, it will promote their cooperation faster. I'm tired. Li Tianlan interrupted Zhuang Huayang. I don't want to think about these problems now. Zhuang Huayang opened his mouth and suddenly felt that he had nothing to say. Bang! The door of the office was violently pushed open from the outside. The 3 of them turned their heads at the same time. In their sight, Wang Yuetong, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai, stood outside the door. She seemed to come in a hurry. When she appeared outside the door, her long hair was a little messy and her breathing was a little rapid. Li Tianlan was stunned where he was. Wang Yuetong also looked at Li Tianlan in a daze. She tried to open her eyes wide to look at the man in front of her. All kinds of intense emotions kept changing in her eyes. Surprise, confusion, uneasiness, and trance. Her vision began to blur. Her eyes were full of dense water vapor. Senior brother Tianlan, Wang Yuetong called out weakly and slowly walked to Li Tianlan, as if she couldn't believe it was true. Long time no see. Li Tianlan smiled dryly. Wang Yuetong hesitated and reached out her hand. Finally, she threw herself into Li Tianlan's arms and hugged him tightly. Her delicate body trembled. A warm and fragrant body fell into his arms. It was very familiar, but not the feeling he wanted. Or rather, not what he wanted most. His body stiffened. Wang Yuetong felt this change, and her heart suddenly ached. Chapter 269. Hanyu Palace was still Hanyu Palace. However, few people knew that this exquisite and luxurious palace built in Huading by the Jiang family of South America had changed owners. Now it had become the headquarters of East Emperor Palace. This was the headquarters that Qin Weibai had seized from the Jiang family of South America and given to Li Tianlan. Ironically, although Li Tianlan knew the existence of this place, he had never been here before he came back from Changdao. What was even more ridiculous was that the woman who gave him this place had nothing to do with him anymore. Li Tianlan did not laugh. It had been nearly a week since he reappeared in the sight of everyone in Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan had been living here, but he had not laughed once. The news that he was still alive had spread all over Zhongzhou State in a few days. The special warfare system of Zhongzhou State had also become noisy and lively, especially in the two special warfare academies, the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy, which caused an uproar. But the East Emperor Palace was extremely calm. Yu Donglai was still in charge of the headquarters of the East Emperor Palace. On the day Li Tianlan came back, after the initial surprise and excitement, the people of the East Emperor Palace just gathered together for a drink. The turbulent general trend and the bizarre resurrection seemed to be over. As Yu Donglai said, everything was not important. The most important thing was to be alive. After the Battle of Changdao, the East Emperor Palace had formed a very close team. After the test of life and death, they had a tacit understanding. Li Beidian, Ning Qiancheng, Su Chu, Du Hanin, Yu Qingyan, Yi Huayu, and Li Tianlan. Among the 7, 5 of them were among the top 10 experts of the young generation. Such a luxurious team meant that the East Emperor Palace would have amazing potential and explosive power in the future. Everyone could be sure that if the East Emperor Palace did not disband, it would become a real behemoth in the special warfare system of the empire in 10 years at most. Its future was limitless. This was the most eye-catching young organization. No one denied their future achievements. What they needed most now was growth. Only cultivation could grow. The young people of the East Emperor Palace knew what they needed to do most. The East Emperor Palace, which already had 100,000 credits, needed the most powerful strength to support it no matter what happened in the future. So everyone was cultivating and even gave up part of the courses of the Sky Academy. Except for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan did not cultivate. It was the 6th day since he came back from the Sky Academy. He seldom spoke or moved. There was an artificial lake built around the main building in the East Emperor Palace. The lake was clear and surrounded by green grass. It became Li Tianlan's favorite place. During the day, he would sit there and watch the lake. At night, he would sit there and look at the starry sky. The lake water was clear. The starry sky was vast. Everything was beautiful. But Li Tianlan became quieter and quieter. That amazing and perfect demeanor after his resurrection began to fade away. His entire person became more and more ordinary. In such a state, he seemed to have completely given up on martial arts and all his fighting spirit. There was only silence left in him. It was quiet day after day. However, the whole Zhongzhou state became turbulent because of the news that Li Tianlan was still alive. Yu Donglai, who had been silent for several days, looked at Li Tianlan, who was getting quieter and quieter. Finally, he could not help but ask the question in his heart. What the hell are you thinking about? When Yu Donglai asked this question, it was already night in Huading. The starlight in early autumn was the most flourishing. The sky was full of starlight, the gentle lake water, and the main building, which was mostly made of glass, were all emitting a faint light. There was no light in the East Emperor Palace. There was only starlight around. Li Tianlan sat quietly on the grass, feeling the starlight and the running water. He seemed to be immersed in this inextricable rhythm. Yu Donglai interrupted his enjoyment. His voice was a little cold, angry, and disappointed. I'm not thinking about anything. Li Tianlan glanced at Yu Donglai and whispered, it's good to be in a daze like this. That's the best. You don't even think about the Li family? Yu Donglai sneered. His old eyes narrowed, and there was a sharp light in his pupils. This is your East Emperor Palace, your foundation. Li Beidian and Ning Qiancheng are all fighting desperately. What have you been doing these days? I don't see any fighting spirit in you. Why? Do you want to give up after your foundation is ruined? He took a step forward and looked at Li Tianlan condescendingly. If you are really like this, what's the point of us staying here? It's meaningful. Li Tianlan said indifferently. You're in a daze like this and you're too lazy to move every day. Is that meaningful? Yu Donglai's face was full of sarcasm. He couldn't be blamed for losing his composure. As one of the sacred guards who followed Li Honghe, the old man had indescribable feelings for the Li family. His children were also buried in the desolate border because of Li Guangtu's treason case. For many years, Yu Donglai had suppressed too many emotions in his heart. When he gradually became numb to these emotions, Li Tianlan, who had the wind and thunder veins, appeared in his life. Yu Donglai now regarded Li Tianlan as all his hope. He hoped to see the Li family shine again in Li Tianlan's hands. He hoped to see Li Tianlan avenge his children who were buried in the desolate border. But what he saw now was Li Tianlan's decadence. Every year, he sat by the lake, half dead. What was that? It's meaningful to be in a daze. Li Tianlan said softly. His tone was soft and firm. Don't worry, Senior Yu. I know what I'm doing. Yu Donglai frowned. In the past few days, Li Tianlan's state had made him extremely uneasy. He simply sat down beside Li Tianlan and said in a low voice, "What's your plan?" "I'm hesitant. I'm trying to find a path that suits me." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. The world is quiet. Yu Donglai looked at Li Tianlan in astonishment. What do you mean? We can hear voices, the sound of flowing water, all kinds of music, explosions, collisions. We can hear these just because our position is too low. If we stand on a high place and look down from a very high position, the surging sea and the shaking rivers and mountains are all quiet. This is the essence of the world. Li Tianlan's voice became more and more light. Yu Donglai's expression gradually became serious. He looked at Li Tianlan and waited for him to continue. But what if it's higher? Li Tianlan sat there quietly. His voice was very calm, but Yu Donglai clearly felt a kind of fanaticism. We stand on a very high place and look at the mountains and seas. They are all quiet. What if it's higher? Higher and higher. No matter how vast the mountains and seas are, they will eventually become nothingness. So above the quiet, there is nothingness. What the hell are you talking about? Yu Donglai had a headache. Let's talk about my martial arts. For the first time in a few days, Li Tianlan smiled without any emotion. After the Battle of Changdao, I directly entered the invincible realm. At that time, I stood at a very high place in martial arts. So whether it was the ice, the raging fire, or the thunderbolt, they were all quiet in my eyes. They were pictures that were so quiet that they were almost frozen. Those pictures were like paper. When I used my sword, no matter if they were in the thunder-shocking realm or the chi-controlling realm, they were all non-entities. Then I saw the fight between deity and Wang Tianzong. From the beginning to the end, the two of them didn't show their real bodies. It was just two-sword intense fighting. What was more ridiculous was that no one could see through them from the beginning to the end. Even at that time, there was a considerable gap between me and the two of them. Li Tianlan said quietly. His eyes were firm and clear. So at that time, I understood that the quiet was not the ultimate of martial arts. Above the quiet, to the highest position, everything will become nothingness. The light and the shadow of the sword, the light and the darkness, are all nothingness. This was the real road of the heavenly sun. But there was a trace of hesitation and confusion in Li Tianlan's eyes. But if everything is nothingness, then what are the four realms of martial arts? What are they? Yu Donglai didn't notice Li Tianlan's tone and asked subconsciously. I'm thinking about it too. Li Tianlan said softly, when I figure it out, I can really start over. Yu Donglai smiled bitterly. He finally understood Li Tianlan's problem. It was not the disheartedness after his foundation was completely destroyed, but his doubts about the current martial arts concept. If the high point of martial arts was nothingness, then what were the four realms of martial arts? No matter what it was, it would not be the four realms of martial arts. Li Tianlan was the heavenly son of Zhongzhou state, and he had seen the high point of martial arts. Now he began to doubt the four realms of martial arts, which could only mean one thing. The road of the four realms of martial arts could not reach the end he saw. Was the end he saw, the nothingness he saw wrong, or the current four realms of martial arts was wrong? Yu Donglai sighed deeply. He used to be at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, which was far from the level where he saw the world as a quiet place. He couldn't help Li Tianlan with such a problem. A phone suddenly rang. Yu Donglai took out his mobile phone and answered the phone, saying hello. The person on the other end of the phone said something. Yu Donglai looked at Li Tianlan with a puzzled face. It's the phone of the security room at the door. Who is Li Wangsheng? Looking for you. Li Tianlan was stunned, and then said, it's my brother. Let him in. Yu Donglai nodded, said something to the phone, and then put away his mobile phone. The security room was a temporary facility of East Emperor Palace. During the months when Li Tianlan was in Changdao, Wang Yuetong took care of everything here. The Jiang family of South America handed Han Yu Palace over to Qin Weibai, and Qin Weibai handed it over to Li Tianlan. Neither of them would leave anything or arrange anything in terms of security. Wang Yuetong hired a group of security guards and temporarily placed them at the door. In addition, a large area of East Emperor Palace was being renovated. The training ground, shooting range, and leisure area had begun to take shape. Wang Yuetong obviously wanted to leave some traces of herself here. Yu Donglai saw all her actions, but he didn't say anything. Li Wangsheng. This name is a bit familiar. Yu Donglai repeated it a few times and suddenly said. Now he is the close guard of the president. Li Tianlan remembered the words of his grandfather and headmaster Zhuang Huayang, and said casually, he is also one of the candidates for Spirit Tortoise in Zhongzhou State. Grandpa recommended him to the president when he went to the border some time ago. Yu Donglai nodded knowingly. His eyes were a little complicated and sad. Li Honghe's battle at the border was not a secret at all. Yu Donglai also got the news from different channels. He was silent for a while, and then whispered, His Highness is now in Lonely Mountain in Linpen. Li Tianlan nodded. Is there any special reaction from Zhongzhou State? No reaction. Yu Donglai's tone was solemn and depressed. No reaction didn't mean there was no special reaction. On the contrary, no reaction was the most special. The Li family would only live for itself in the future. Li Honghe took the remnants of the Li family out of the border blatantly, went to Linpen, and occupied Lonely Mountain by the West Lake in a domineering and almost unreasonable way. Zhongzhou State had no reaction to this. Whether it was Kunlun City, the Wang family of Beihai, or the Prince Group, they didn't say much, as if they didn't know about this at all. Li Tianlan was silent, and the whole person seemed to be quieter. A military off-road vehicle drove in from the direction of the gate of East Emperor Palace. The vehicle stopped near Li Tianlan, and the door opened. In the night, a young man who looked 24 or 25 years old got out of the car with a suitcase. A very honest young man. This was Yu Donglai's first impression. The young man was not tall, and his appearance was ordinary. He looked a little dull. He walked to Li Tianlan, and his eyes were full of joy. He heard the news that Li Tianlan died in Changdao. And he heard the news that Li Tianlan came back to life. He was excited and surprised. Now, standing in front of Li Tianlan, the young man scratched his head, and a very sincere and shy smile appeared on his dull face. He whispered, Young master. Sit down. Li Tianlan smiled and patted the grass beside him. The young man seemed to be not good at talking, and he sat down beside Li Tianlan honestly. This is Li Wangsheng, Aunt Qingye's son. Li Tianlan simply introduced, this is Senior Yu Donglai, Grandpa's close guard. Li Wangsheng scratched his head again, and his dull face was a little reserved. Greetings, Senior Yu. Qingye's son. Yu Donglai looked a little emotional. Qingye of the Li family was one of the most outstanding women in the young generation of the Li family. Yu Donglai even served as Qingye's immediate superior for a while. But now, in the blink of an eye, the son of the young generation at that time had grown up. Yu Donglai nodded with a smile and said nothing more. What's in the suitcase? Li Tianlan looked at the suitcase in Li Wangxing's hand. Fragments. Li Wangxing's tone was simple and serious. He hesitated, opened the suitcase, and sent it to Li Tianlan. Starlight and moonlight shrouded the lightless East Emperor Palace. In the faint light, some broken silver metal pieces in the suitcase were emitting a dim, almost imperceptible light. Fragments of the infinite sky. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and asked softly. Yu Donglai's face suddenly changed. The murderous weapon infinite sky. The murderous weapon of the Li family that was smashed at the border with the treason case 19 years ago. His Highness had been at the border for many years, but he only found these fragments. Yes. Li Wangxing scratched his head. When I came out, so many things hadn't happened yet. At that time, Grandpa Li asked me to give this to you. He asked you to have a chance to give these to the Dongqing clan. He said that the Dongqing clan could be completely trusted. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he closed the suitcase in his hand. Li Wangxing looked at him, his eyes very focused. From childhood to adulthood, Li Tianlan and he had a very good friendship, but they didn't communicate much with each other. Li Wangxing was not good with words, and Li Tianlan was not a talkative person. Most of the friendship between the two was built by learning from each other along the way. Li Wangxing was no match for Li Tianlan. But he was the only young man in the Li family who could keep up with Li Tianlan's pace. Even when Li Tianlan was at his peak, he didn't leave Li Wangxing too far behind. Such a figure, when Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and Jiang Shangyu withdrew from the Battle of Spirit Tortoise, Li Wangxing was definitely the most suitable candidate for Spirit Tortoise in Zhongzhou State. And perhaps in the eyes of the academics, Li Wangxing was more suitable than Su Chu. What specific arrangements does the president have for you? Li Tianlan patted the suitcase beside him and looked at Li Wangxing. Terracotta Army. Li Wangxing was silent for a while before he replied in a muffled voice. Li Tianlan nodded and said, "Good position. I'll listen to you, young master." Li Wangxing smiled and said in a sincere tone. Li Tianlan said yes, put the suitcase beside him, and said with a smile, "Go to rest, and leave tomorrow morning." "No. Young master." Li Wangxing hesitated and shook his head. "I have to rush back to Yuzhou overnight. The president has been under a lot of pressure recently. He often has meetings, and there are foreign affairs activities tomorrow. I have to be there." Li Tianlan said yes, okay. In the night, Li Wangxing stood up, and his dull face seemed to be a little hesitant. He didn't hesitate to tell Li Tianlan anything, but he didn't have clear information, and he was afraid to say it now to mislead the young master. But after hesitating, he still said, "Young master, be careful recently. It is said that the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City are very close, and you. Well. Be careful." Li Tianlan lowered his head. In the darkness, his eyes were deep and silent, bottomless. "Got it," he said, "it's okay." Li Wangxing took a deep look at him, nodded, and turned to get in the car and left. Until the car went far away, Yu Donglai frowned. "I seem to have heard some rumors recently. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City are getting closer and closer. They seem to want to change the pattern of the special warfare system together. Even if they don't aim at you, I'm afraid you will become the main factor. Grandpa is still here." Li Tianlan said faintly, "They dare not act rashly. They definitely don't dare to attack you directly, but if they join hands to change the situation and squeeze your living space in the future, what can His Highness say?" Yu Donglai smiled bitterly. "It's okay." Li Tianlan said calmly, "These shouldn't be my concerns now. Now I'm a useless person, what can I do? Let the outside world go. The most important thing now is to see my future path clearly. Only watch himself, not the world." Li Honghe was still there, so he didn't need to worry about the Li family. Tribulation had broken through to the invincible realm, so he didn't need to worry about Sai City. Samsara Palace, Li Tianlan's face turned pale. How could he worry about Qin Weibai, who had nothing to do with him? Li Tianlan closed his eyes, feeling the tearing pain and anger in his chest. After a long time, he took a deep breath, and his eyes became quiet again. Yu Donglai had gotten up and left at some point. Li Tianlan sat quietly alone, with only the gentle lake water and the bright starlight in front of him. Suddenly, the wind blew. The crisp sound of bells could be heard in the wind. Wang Yuetong walked over in the night, wearing a simple white t-shirt, jeans, canvas shoes, and a ponytail. She looked extremely youthful. She was holding the golden retriever she gave to Li Tianlan. The golden retriever had grown up a lot in a few months. The bell tied around its neck jingled in the night wind. Senior brother. Wang Yuetong walked to Li Tianlan, her voice sweet and gentle. Like the night wind. You've been sitting for a day. Go and have a rest. She squatted down beside Li Tianlan and said softly. I'm not tired. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Yuetong and said softly, go to sleep first. The young man and woman, who had been close enough to sleep in the same bed, still looked close these days. But as Li Tianlan became quieter and quieter, there seemed to be a clear estrangement between them. Wang Yuetong didn't know what was going on. She only felt wronged. Li Tianlan, on the other hand, was confused. I'll stay here with you. Wang Yuetong forced a smile and said softly. No need. Li Tianlan looked at the lake water in front of him and said softly, I'll be alone. The night wind blew the hair in front of Wang Yuetong's forehead. Her face was a little pale, and her eyes were sad. Then. I'll let the baby stay with you. She lowered her head and looked at the golden retriever in her hand. The golden retriever whimpered and lay down beside Li Tianlan, its tail gently sweeping Wang Yuetong's calf. Okay. Li Tianlan nodded with a smile. Wang Yuetong was silent for a while, looked at Li Tianlan seriously, and finally turned to leave. Her figure was enchanting and beautiful, but she looked a little absent-minded. The phone rang suddenly. Wang Yuetong took out her mobile phone and looked at the number. Her face suddenly changed, and she didn't dare to answer it for a while. The phone rang calmly and patiently. Wang Yuetong's face was pale, and her fingers began to tremble. She hesitated to answer the phone, put it to her ear, and didn't dare to speak for a while. Yuetong. A gentle and calm male voice sounded on the phone. Wang Yuetong looked more and more panicked, and even cried miserably, Dad. Wang Tianzong. The Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, who had let his daughter stay with Li Tianlan, finally called Wang Yuetong's mobile phone. Go home. Wang Tianzong said indifferently, You're not fit to stay in Huading anymore. Do you want me to pick you up in person? Wang Yuetong bit her lip and stubbornly refused to make a sound. She turned her head and looked at the night when she came. The night was gentle. Li Tianlan still sat there quietly. The golden retriever lay beside him, gently wagging its tail. Chapter 270. The shock caused by Li Tianlan's return to Zhongzhou State had not subsided. Instead, as time went by, the atmosphere in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State became more and more tense. All the topics about Li Tianlan began to become more and more popular. With his return, the whole Zhongzhou State had a sign of the coming storm. All this was not because of Li Tianlan's strength or even his talent. It was because of his identity. Just because of his identity. He was the heir of the Li family and the grandson of Li Honghe. This identity was like a mirror. Standing in Zhongzhou State, he could clearly reflect the foundation of Kunlun City, the doubts of the treason case, the meaning of the silence of the Wang family of Beihai, and the firm position of Sai City over the years. This was a very embarrassing thing. Kunlun City didn't want to see Li Tianlan, because they stepped on the wreckage of the Li family to climb to their current position. Anyone of the Li family would be instinctively regarded as a threat. The Wang family of Beihai didn't want to see Li Tianlan either, because their silence, no matter right or wrong, had proved the correctness of their silence over the years. More than 20 years ago, the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family jointly supported the southeast group of the empire. Now, the Wang family of Beihai was supreme in the southeast group. So Li Tianlan's appearance was also a threat to the Wang family of Beihai. But now Li Tianlan was famous in the dark world, and he was the young governor of Sai City. If he died in Changdao, that would be the perfect ending. But he didn't die now. After his miraculous resurrection, his identity suddenly pushed the Wang family of Beihai and Sai City into a situation where no one was willing to act rashly. So the Li family only lived for itself. Li Tianlan was also the young governor of Sai City. The most important thing was that Li Tianlan had become the hero of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City were ready to move, but they didn't. Li Tianlan didn't move either. So the atmosphere in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State became more and more tense. For the time being, not many people knew Li Tianlan's current state. People's impression of him always stayed at the last moment of the final battle of Changdao. In that state, Li Tianlan controlled the resources of Sai City and the remaining light of the Li family. Although he was still far behind Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai, at least he had the power to fight. Everyone was waiting for Li Tianlan's move. As soon as he made a move, the greatest upheaval in the imperial special warfare system in the past 20 years would begin. Li Tianlan was moving. The so-called movement was nothing more than that he didn't sit by the lake, but wandered around the East Emperor Palace casually. Now the East Emperor Palace, which still had the sign of Hanyu Palace, was not large. It covered an area of nearly 200 acres, but it was exquisite everywhere. Flowers, trees, pavilions, terraces, and towers were in picturesque disorder. Li Tianlan walked in it all day, and the change of his whole person became more and more obvious. Everyone could feel this change. Li Tianlan became more and more ordinary. The calmness that calmed people's hearts began to disappear from him. Dressed in white, he walked among the flowers and plants, but he floated like a speck of dust. He was so small and silent that everyone almost completely ignored him. His temperament became more and more illusory every day. He stood there and could be seen by everyone, but people just couldn't focus on him. Illusory. Li Tianlan was still thinking and trying. He didn't know whether his change was good or bad, but he was sure that as long as there was a change, it was always good. It had been half a month since he came back from the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan's physical state didn't improve at all. There were more and more paths in front of him, so many that he didn't know which one was right. Thinking, testing, and choosing, his heart was still calm, and he didn't seem to be anxious at all. Time passed slowly. The early autumn gradually passed. When the Mid-Autumn Festival was approaching, Su Chu, who had been staying in the East Emperor Palace and only occasionally went to the Sky Academy to attend classes, found Li Tianlan and looked a little bashful. Li Tianlan's state of mind seemed to really become peaceful. Looking at Su Chu, who had a determined face in the past, he couldn't help laughing and joking, "Brother Su, what are you doing? Are you shy to say it? Your body shape has nothing to do with this word." Su Chu scratched his head. He was tall and majestic. Standing in front of Li Tianlan, who was becoming more and more illusory, he looked like a giant. "Young master. Aunt Bai wants to see you. She's on her way now." Su Chu hesitated and said in a deep voice. "Aunt Bai." Li Tianlan didn't respond for a while. Before he came back, the East Emperor Palace had an endless stream of visitors. But since he came back, all the visitors suddenly disappeared without a trace. This could also show how much waves his appearance had brought to Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan didn't care about these. He just felt that it was good to be quiet. Now hearing such a title from Su Chu's mouth, he subconsciously felt a little confused. "Secretary Bai Qingqian, it was Aunt Bai who asked me to come to young master," Su Chu said softly. Bai Qingqian was the leader of Guangdong Province, an extraordinary woman in the political circle of Zhongzhou State, and also the backbone of the giant group of Zhongzhou State. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. For him, the most important identity of Aunt Bai was the wife of Marshal Dongqing Wudi and the mother of Dongqing Rushi. Li Tianlan thought of the marriage contract that he had almost subconsciously forgotten and suddenly had a headache. But a headache was a headache. Since she was here, he couldn't ignore her. He looked at Su Chu and asked, "Where is she?" In the bleak autumn wind in the morning, he turned around and said slowly, "Come with me to pick her up. We're almost there." Su Chu followed Li Tianlan and said in a low voice, "When Aunt Bai called me, she was about 10 kilometers away from here." Li Tianlan nodded and walked to the door. "Where are you going, Tianlan?" Another voice rang out behind the two of them. Ning Qianqing walked over. Compared with Su Chu, he was much more direct. "I just received a call from Marshal. Marshal wants to come over and sit down. He'll be here soon." Although there was more than one marshal in Zhengzhou state, there was only one marshal in Ning Qianqing's mouth. Li Tianlan looked at Su Chu, who had a strange expression, and then at Ning Qianqing. He couldn't help but ask, "Marshal came by himself?" "Yes." Ning Qianqing said casually, "Marshal has a meeting in Yuzhou in the evening, so he came to Huading to see you in advance." Li Tianlan and Su Chu looked at each other. Dongqing Wudi. Bai Qingqian. Why did this couple come at the same time? Did they make an appointment in advance? Li Tianlan thought of his marriage contract with Dongqing Rushi again and only felt great pressure. He waved his hand helplessly and said, "Let's go and welcome them together." "Where's Senior Yu?" Grandpa and Qing Yan went out. Ning Qianqing called him Grandpa naturally. Now he slept with Yu Qing Yan in the same room under the eyes of Yu Donglai. The future of this young couple was completely determined. Li Tianlan nodded, squinted, and walked directly to the gate of East Emperor Palace. Bai Qingqian, his future mother-in-law, who he had never contacted, came with unknown intentions. But the arrival of Dongqing Wudi was enough to make him realize something. It had been a month since he appeared in the Sky Academy. Although East Emperor Palace lived a life similar to isolation, the outside world was doomed to be restless. Now that Dongqing Wudi came here, some arguments in the outside world had basically come to a clear conclusion. Li Tianlan was expressionless. He knew very well that this result would not be good for him and the East Emperor Palace. Did Marshal say anything on the phone? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. No. Ning Qianqing walked beside him, shook his head, and said casually, "But I can guess it. It's mostly about your marriage with Rushi." So Marshal and Secretary Bai came together? Li Tianlan gave a wry smile. Madam also came? Ning Qianqing looked surprised. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian bumped into each other. Obviously, Ning Qianqing did not know whether it was a coincidence or deliberate. Tut tut. They're forcing you to take a stand. Tianlan, what are you going to do? I have no plan. Li Tianlan told the truth. Grandpa said that Dongqing clan could be trusted. But Li Tianlan did not know whether he should believe Dongqing Rushi or not. On the night when he and Dongqing Rushi performed a reconnaissance mission together in Changdao, the moment they were exposed, Li Tianlan wasn't sure whether Dongqing Rushi wanted to kill him or not. But he was sure that when everything in Changdao was about to end, the woman in white who pierced his heart with a sword also had a red crystal-clear dagger on her waist. She could not understand these things. If she could not understand, she would not think about it. If she did not think about it, she naturally had no plan. So for the couple who were about to come to East Emperor Palace, no matter where they were, Li Tianlan did not have much resistance in his heart, but he did not have many thoughts of welcoming them. The three came to the gate of East Emperor Palace in silence and looked at the smooth and clean road outside. It was quiet on the road. Occasionally, some yellowed leaves fell to the ground with the wind, making a slight sound. In front of the gate of East Emperor Palace, the security guards temporarily hired by Wang Yuetong from the labor market had begun to change shifts. Seeming to feel something, Li Tianlan instinctively turned his head. In his sight, two seemingly ordinary security guards took over the security guards on duty and walked into the duty room. One was tall and the other was short, one fat and one thin. Seeming to notice Li Tianlan's gaze, the two nodded to Li Tianlan and showed a somewhat flattering smile. The slightly fat security guard even tilted his hat when he raised his hand to salute, which looked a little funny. Li Tianlan did not smile. His eyes suddenly became clear and deep, looking very strange. At this moment, his whole person seemed to have completely disappeared, leaving only a pair of eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. "What's wrong?" Ning Qianqing noticed Li Tianlan's movement and looked along his line of sight. He just saw the two security guards walk into the duty room. Ning Qianqing couldn't help laughing. Yuetong is a fool. I have investigated these security guards. There are 12 of them, all of whom Yuetong brought from the labor market. Each of them bragged that they were retired from the special forces, and Yuetong really believed them. But in fact, among the 12 people, only one is a real veteran of the special forces, and one has military service experience in a third-rate force. The other 9 are ordinary people. I asked Holong to check their backgrounds in detail. These people are fine and have no bad records, so I didn't tell Yuetong and kept them all. Yuetong still doesn't know what's going on. If you think about it, you can understand. How can there be so many retired special forces soldiers in the labor market? Li Tianlan gently raised the corner of his mouth and his eyes gradually calmed down. The labor market? He asked softly. Yes. Ning Qianqing nodded casually. He looked at Li Tianlan and suddenly frowned. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Li Tianlan smiled and didn't say anything. Problem? It was more than a problem. He entered the invincible realm in Changdao and came back to life in Zhongzhou state. Now his martial arts realm was almost zero, but after his nirvana rebirth, his perception was incredibly sharp. The two security guards on duty last night were indeed fine. But when the two who had just changed shifts came over, Li Tianlan instinctively felt a vague but strong sense of oppression. It was not hostility or killing intent, but a very natural sense of oppression. They hid it well. Li Tianlan even felt that if he stood in front of them before he went to Changdao, or even when he was in the thunder-shocking realm, he would hardly feel this sense of oppression. However, the acute senses he gained after he was reborn clearly reminded him of how strong the oppressive aura these two security guards gave off was. They were the security guards that Wang Yuetong had recruited from the labor market. But when did the whole dark world fall so low that even experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm had to work as security guards? And there were 2 of them at once? Who could afford such high-end security guards? Li Tianlan suddenly smiled. Chapter 271. Even if he was still in the invincible realm like when he was in Changdao, he would not really treat experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm as cabbages, not to mention that Li Tianlan had started from scratch. There was a natural chasm between the thunder-shocking realm and the invincible realm. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm was basically the end of martial arts for most geniuses. Such a person would be a well-deserved high-level figure in any force. No matter how bad he would not come here to be a security guard. And there were only a few forces that could send 2 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and had connections with him. It might be the Jiang family of South America that had given up this place but still coveted it. It might also be the experts of the Wang family of Beihai who saw Wang Yuetong hiring security guards and deliberately sneaked in. It might be Sai City, which stood aloof from worldly affairs but cared about him very much. It might also be Kunlun City, which had always been vigilant and wanted to kill him. Or, Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly became a little dim. He turned around again and looked at the empty and straight road in his sight. No matter which force these 2 experts belonged to, Li Tianlan did not feel any hostility from them. If there was no hostility, then it was not an emergency that needed to be solved now. A black Audi slowly drove over from the east of the road. "Young master, they are coming." Su Chu's simple and honest voice sounded. This first senior brother of Jade Pool looked at the car in the distance with undisguised kindness and respect in his eyes. Li Tianlan subconsciously stood up straight. He was not nervous, but he did feel a little uncomfortable. The car drove at a constant speed and finally stopped in front of Li Tianlan and the other two. A woman under 30 years old got out of the driver's seat. She was not beautiful, but she was a very elegant woman. The woman's dress was very neutral, and her every move showed extremely rigorous cultivation and style. Su Chu quickly walked over and nodded at the woman. The woman who was about to open the door glanced at Su Chu and stood there with a smile. Su Chu opened the door and scratched his head with the other hand. He looked tough and resolute, but now he showed a simple and honest smile without any scheming. "Aunt Bai," he called her softly. A woman who looked at most in her early 30s got out of the car gently and patted Su Chu's arm with a smile. She said with a chuckle, "How is it? Are you used to living here?" "Adapt." Su Chu smiled honestly with some uneasiness. "Young master is very kind to me, but I didn't help him, you are all still young." The woman said softly, "There's still a long way to go. I'll be of help one day." She turned her head and her eyes finally fell on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was also looking at her, the most brilliant woman in the political arena of Zhongzhou State in recent years. This was a woman who seemed to be born with a noble aura. She was graceful and luxurious. That kind of beauty could no longer be simply called beautiful, but a kind of beauty that made people feel awe. This was the first time Li Tianlan met Bai Qingqian. She was beautiful, elegant, dignified, noble, and calm. Her face had a beauty that didn't match her age. She was a little haggard, but she had a dignified air that came from being in a high position for a long time. Li Tianlan looked at her, lost in thought. He couldn't describe what he was feeling, but he instinctively felt that Aunt Bai, whom he had just met for the first time, was really familiar and kind. Because of familiarity and intimacy, everything about her was perfect. It was so perfect that he forgot to speak for a moment and just looked at her quietly. Time seemed to freeze in this morning. Li Tianlan looked at Bai Qingqian. Bai Qingqian stared at Li Tianlan. Her eyes trembled with intense emotions, gentle and sad. The sound of a car horn broke the frozen atmosphere. An off-road vehicle with a military license plate came to the gate of East Emperor Palace from another direction. The door opened, and Dongqing Wudi, who was wearing a marshal's uniform, got out of the car. He stood straight, strong and iron-blooded. When he saw his wife, his face changed slightly, and then a bitter smile appeared on his clean face. Obviously, this collision was purely a coincidence, and the two didn't communicate with each other in advance. In fact, the two of them hadn't communicated with each other for a long time. Li Tianlan suddenly came to his senses. In his sight, the gaze was still gentle, so gentle that it made his heart tremble. Li Tianlan subconsciously looked away, avoiding Bai Qingqian, and looked at Dongqing Wudi, who was walking slowly over. He forced a smile and said, "Hello, Marshal, long time no see." "Long time no see." Dongqing Wudi stood beside Bai Qingqian with a bitter smile. "This is your Aunt Bai. You haven't seen her before. What a coincidence today." "Aunt Bai." Bai Qingqian looked at Dongqing Wudi's bitter smile, and her eyes were cold. "Aunt Bai." Li Tianlan's mouth moved, and he called her with some difficulty. He hadn't seen Secretary Bai before, but now standing in front of her, he instinctively wanted to get close to her, but he didn't dare to. Bai Qingqian's body trembled slightly. She struggled to smile and said softly, "I've always wanted to see you. How are you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Li Tianlan smiled, reached out to welcome the guest, and said with a smile, "Marshal, Secretary. Let's go in and talk." He turned around in a panic and went straight into the gate. For Dongqing Wudi, Li Tianlan only had respect and gratitude in his heart. But for Bai Qingqian, who he met for the first time, he felt pressure. The pressure was so gentle, but it made him so attached and panicked. Bai Qingqian looked at Li Tianlan's back quietly. She had 1,000 words in her heart. But she couldn't say a word. What could she say? She came here just to see. She could only see. Dongqing Wudi gave a dry cough and reached out to hold his wife's hand. Su Chu and Ning Qianqing were still there. Her secretary was also here. Bai Qingqian didn't make any drastic movements, but gently but firmly broke her hand from Dongqing Wudi's. Her movements were naturally delicate, slow, and cold. Wang Yuetong already knew that there were visitors, so when Li Tianlan led them into the living room, Wang Yuetong, dressed in casual home clothes, had already begun to make tea. She had just gotten up, and her face was bare. She looked pure and sweet, and her golden retriever, which had grown up a lot, was circling around her feet, looking very happy. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian had long known that Wang Yuetong was living with Li Tianlan. The former's expression was calm, but the latter's eyes became more and more complicated when she saw this scene. Marshal, Secretary Bai, welcome. Seeing Li Tianlan and the others come in, Wang Yuetong stood up with a smile, walked naturally to Li Tianlan, and said softly. This was the standard hostess's posture. Wang Yuetong already knew about the engagement between Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi. Now facing Dongqing Rushi's parents, she obviously wanted to defend something, or rather, protect something. So her posture was very natural, but because it was too natural, it looked a little stiff. Especially her eyes. She seemed to be afraid that Li Tianlan would be angry, and her eyes were a little perturbed. She was the proudest little princess of the Wang family of Beihai. Dongqing Wudi smiled ambiguously and said, Yuetong, how is your father? In fact, he had just met Wang Tianzong at a high-level meeting a few days ago, but in the face of the younger generation, he really didn't know what to say, so he could only greet him dryly. Not bad. Wang Yuetong smiled. Seeing that Li Tianlan wasn't angry, she was a little relieved and took the initiative to say, sit down, Tianlan hasn't had breakfast. I'll make it. She turned around and walked slowly to the kitchen. Ning Qianqing hesitated for a moment and quietly pulled Su Chu away. Bai Qingqian's secretary quietly closed the door and stood outside the living room. For a moment, only Dongqing Wudi, his wife, and Li Tianlan were left in the living room, and the atmosphere suddenly became a little awkward and stiff. Marshal, since you are here today, there should be a result of those things outside, right? Li Tianlan took the initiative to pour a cup of tea for Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian, and said with a smile. In fact, he didn't care about what happened outside, but there were some things that he had to take the initiative to say. As a junior, he shouldn't put on airs in any case. It's settled. Dongqing Wudi held the teacup and said absent-mindedly, Li Wangsheng will enter the Terracotta Army and become the new spirit tortoise of Zhongzhou State. His military rank is temporarily Major General. When he grows up in the future, he will be the real general of 9 regions. Li Tianlan nodded. The reason why Spirit Tortoise of the Terracotta Army chose young people this time was to change the blood inside and cultivate the next generation of 4 spirit generals in advance. The military rank was not important, but the position was the most important. Sai City will also take action recently. Now that they have a second invincible realm expert, they must bear greater responsibility. Tribulation, Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, and Deep Dream should all have an official identity, but this matter can't be decided for the time being. If there is no accident, in the next year or 2, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State will definitely change dramatically. Tianlan, this is not necessarily a good thing for you. Dongqing Wudi seemed to think of something and said in a dignified tone. This was the main purpose of his visit today. Gu Xingyan still hasn't given up. Does he want to improve the status of the special warfare system in Zhongzhou State? Bai Qingqian suddenly asked. How can he give up? The time was not right before, and he was just testing. Now the appearance of Tianlan and the Li family is equivalent to an opportunity. He can naturally join hands with the Wang family of Beihai, and with the support of the Prince Group, this time is almost perfect for him. What do you mean? Li Tianlan asked seriously. Dongqing Wudi looked at Li Tianlan, thought for a moment, and said, "What Gu Xingyun means is to give the special warfare system more responsibilities and functions, and strengthen the constraints on some free forces in the special warfare system." He suggested that Zhongzhou State set up special warfare departments in different regions, such as the Southeast Special Warfare Department, which is responsible for the special affairs of Wuyue, Huading, Jiangxia, and other provinces. The minister will participate in the meetings of the Zhongzhou State Decision-Making Committee. The appointment of subordinate units, such as the Wuyue Special Operations Bureau and the Huading Special Operations Bureau, should be approved by Kunlun City and the Southeast Special Warfare Department. The head of the Special Operations Bureau at the provincial level will participate in the Standing Committee of the local province, lead the local free forces, and integrate all the dark forces among the people. Dongqing Wudi looked at Li Tianlan and said, "Simply put, Gu Xingyun wants to turn the special warfare system into a real independent system. I don't know if you can understand it." Li Tianlan's brows were already tightly knitted together. He had thought that his survival would bring a huge storm to the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, but he had never thought that the storm would be so exaggerated. The special warfare system of Zhongzhou State could also be said to be an independent system, but it was more nominal. For example, it shared materials and intelligence with the military. The military and other high-level officials also had a great say in some important personnel appointments. In the past countless years, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State had always been very close to the military. Even now, although Gu Xingyun's position was very high, the whole special warfare system was more like an agency to deal with difficult matters for the military. Although it was independent, it was not independent. Instead, it had a great dependence on the military. Gu Xingyun's proposal this time, the establishment of the so-called Special Warfare Department, was just a beginning. This beginning would undoubtedly greatly strengthen the voice of the special warfare system in Zhongzhou State. With a greater voice, Kunlun City could take advantage of the situation to carry out various reforms, and finally completely turn the special warfare system into a system that could run parallel with the political circle and the military headquarters. In general, if this proposal was really passed by the high-level officials, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State would become more standardized and rigorous in the future. The emergence of a more standardized and rigorous special warfare system had both advantages and disadvantages. But for Li Tianlan, once such a situation became a reality, it was almost equivalent to a fatal blow to his future.